in what way did any forces use the Strait of Hormuz to wage war against Iran? Because it was Iran who shut the Strait of Hormuz and was firing missiles and drones at shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Can you just clarify what you mean by that?
Ships were carrying weapons, logistics, equipment for U.S. military bases. And those equipment, those weapons, and those logistics were used to wage war against Iran and bomb Iran. And never, ever, ever again, Iran is not going to allow that to happen. You cannot wage a war against Iran, kill Iranians, and then say, okay, let's get back to business as usual, as if nothing has happened. No,
so history has changed. I do want to get a clarification on this particular point. Is there a suggestion, therefore, that that either all U.S. and U.S. allied ships are going to be subject to searches by Iran and possibly some sort of penalty if they are suspected of carrying weaponry to U.S. and allied bases in the Gulf, or is there going to be a ban on ships from the U.S. and U.S. allies?
Generally speaking, Iran is not going to allow shipment of U.S. weapons through the Strait of Hormuz. That will be effectively banned. But you know, the talks between Iran and Oman have nothing to do with the indirect negotiations between Iran and the United States. If Iran and Oman reach a deal right today, it doesn't mean that the Strait of Hormuz will be reopened today or tomorrow. Because why the Strait of Hormuz is closed? The Americans frame it as if Iran is the obstacle to the flow of traffic. They frame it as if Iran is the reason why the Strait of Hormuz is closed. No, that's not the case. The Strait of Hormuz is closed because of the U.S. war of aggression against Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is closed because of America's illegitimate naval blockade against Iran. As long as the U.S. war against Iran continues, and as long as the naval blockade against Iran continues, there will be no reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
Can I, forgive me, I'm asking you for a lot of clarifications, and I do appreciate, of course, we don't yet know the details of this deal. We're only getting news that it may come to us possibly in the next few hours, possibly on Thursday. At the same time, you said that this deal was only being done between Iran and Oman, and yet many of the analysts we're talking to are saying, no, absolutely not. The U.S. is to some degree involved in at least presenting cases to Oman, which Oman is then taking into consideration when it then presents its case to Iran. So to some degree, it is true to say that Iran is maybe dealing with Oman, but broadly speaking, it is talking to the U.S., or at least it is having to take into consideration the opinions of the U.S. in this, isn't it?
It is the Omanis who are talking to the Americans. The way Iran looks at the whole issue, Iran is negotiating with the coastal states, Oman, and Iran and Oman are the two coastal states. The United States is continents away from this region, so there is absolutely no reason for Iran to negotiate with the United States over the Strait of Hormuz. There are talks between Oman and the United States. That's true, as a way of providing an opportunity for the United States to end the war. And this is also since the United States is imposing a naval blockade against Iran. And the other issue is that the Americans have intervened to create an alternative route along the southern coast. Iran has put an end to this route. Iran is not going to accept that because it will bypass Iran and will endanger Iran's national security. So that's closed forever. Under no circumstances Iran is going to agree to that. At this point, there are two issues that you
for interrupting you. I'm kind of conscious of the time that we have, but I'm very grateful to you, researcher at the Center for Strategic Study.
I'm serious about what fuels me.
And that's kind of where you go. So this is, my sense is, the people who really love Elon and want to own it, they own it. Everybody else is just trying to figure out.
We're going to try back to Peter Shear right now, Academy Securities. You know, Peter, I look at the market, and the question to me is it like a narrow retail enthusiasm or is there a real lift to this bull market?
Well, one, that's always why I try and come to the studio so I don't have these glitches, but hopefully it's okay now. Separately, I think there's a lot of impact still from the situational awareness trade, right? I think that company, that hedge fund, whatever you want to call it, pushed markets probably much higher than they ever should have been in early June on that AI and tech trade. And then during the unwind, I think it pulled it lower than it should have been. So I think what we're really getting is a bounce from the unwind. I think companies like Microsoft and some of the big cap stocks that they might have been short is trying to hedge some of their positions. So I think right now we've had a lot of noise, and it's only going to settle in, okay, what is the real story? What is the play forward from here? So I think it's really been a little bit more shock and awe related to the situational awareness unwind, and now we can get back to the real story, and we can figure out whether we're at the bottom of the second inning, as Dan says, or maybe this is the sixth inning of this current wave of buildup, which is more where I am.
So that's kind of where I wanted to go, Peter, as you talk to clients around the world. What's kind of the new narrative on AI here? For a while, there was just spend, spend, spend. And then it became, you need to show me return on investment. Are we still in that return kind of phase here?
I actually do, and I think maybe we got carried away with the sell-off during that situational awareness unwind. But I think that is, where are we justifying the cost? Two, I think this cheap Chinese compute is really scary, right? It's reminiscent to me of what they did in the early 2000s, where they brought in, their manufacturing. You look at BYD automobile, right? No one really heard of that 5-6 years ago. Now it dominates Europe. So I'm really concerned that this compute has come on faster than many of us expected, certainly than I expected. That is potentially dangerous for the revenue side of this. And then finally, I think everyone's trying to use AI. And I get a lot of stories. I think it's somewhat maybe anecdotal in my life, and maybe because I've been conservative on it, people are reaching out. But I think everyone's trying to use AI, and everyone's trying to figure out, are we really getting the bang for the buck? And what if AI makes a mistake and we get sued? Who do we sue? How do we protect ourselves? So I think some of the AI spend on the corporate side might slow.
Peter, thank you so much. Peter Shear, Academy Securities. They're too short today of a visit. Up 500, and then Dow pulls back a little, up 467 points, a big 0.9% higher. NASDAQ was up 0.3, now up 0.6% higher. And this, Paul, I think is critical. The VIX goes up. The VIX is supposed to go down.
Yeah.
And it's not.
No, but it's still, we're still here at 17 and change. So, anything below 20, I think feels okay-ish for the market. You give up 20, a little bit of angst.
Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. The markets are open. The S&P 500 is at 7,779. I have a year-end target at 7,800. Yes, we're close to it, but I suspect that the S&P 500 is going to have some sort of decline in this quarter or next quarter. What I have done, I've told people in my previous broadcast that I published that between 7,600 to 7,800, you may want to start selling some of the equities and putting it into cash or cash equivalents. What I did 2 days ago was put about approximately what I had in the S&P 500 as a passive investment. What I did was I moved in cash about 7.8% in cash. Just waiting it out. Let's see what happens. I suspect that we're going to have some more conflict in the Middle East and more talk about debt problems, maybe some currency issues in Asia, and over-leveraging in some of the Asian markets like South Korea, dealing with tech. So right now there's a relief rally taking place in semiconductors and in tech. SSG, which is an ETF to short semiconductors, is trading at 1150. So right now, the momentum is buy tech. But I think that that might actually lose some steam and there'll be an additional downdraft. Now, will it go to 6,800 for the S&P 500? We don't know. We broke the support level we broke that resistance level of 7,600. So there was a big increase yesterday. So we're at 7,770, that's 7,783 right now. And the next resistance level is going to be 7,800. We have a relatively weak support level of 7,600. We have another support level of 7,200, 7,000, and 6,800. Right? Those are the support levels and the resistance levels. But once we get to just past 7,800, you may want to take a little bit more and put it into cash equivalents. Not all of it, just some of it, up to about a third of your S&P 500 position. This is for individuals that are investing. For individuals that are trading, you can go in and out, short the S&P 500 or long it, depending on the day. But for investors, I think it's prudent to take a little bit of your positions if you've bought in a long time ago and put it into cash, wait it out, like I said, anywhere from 5 to 10% maybe right now in cash or cash equivalents. And just wait it out. See if it goes down to 7,200 and then buy again. Or if it goes down to 7,000, buy. If it goes down to 6,800, buy. All right? It's not going to hurt you. But I do think that it just seems a little bit too much of a relief rally for tech, and the fundamentals haven't really changed in terms of over-investing in AI. And what's the real business model? How are these companies going to really make money? These frontier models not getting enough revenue in, and the cost is too expensive, and there's a lot of circular financing. So I think when you look at it from the fundamental level, there are more negatives to the tech build-out and the AI sustainability in its current phase here versus utopia. So just be careful. Just be careful. It seems a little bubbly for equities. VIX is trading at 1697, so it's relatively stable. Currencies are stable right now. Euro's trading at 115. The Japanese yen's trading at 157.53. Oil is trading at 75.56. I have short positions in natural gas and in oil. Bitcoin is trading at 64,450. Natural gas is trading at 2.686. Now, in terms of oil, we're going to have this trading range between $70 to $79 a barrel. If peace happens, we'll be testing the support level of 70, and it may break. It may break. If we don't, then we're going to be marching back up to 79 and test that and maybe trade above 79 in the low 80 handle, maybe 81, 82 handle. It all depends. I suspect that peace will fall apart in the Middle East. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is listen to Al Jazeera. What's being telegraphed to the media from the Iranian side? They want control of the Strait of Hormuz. They are basically saying they're not going to abide by maritime law. So Trump, by intervening and not getting the job done, has now opened up the can of worms that all straits now are in question in terms of following maritime law and allowing for freedom of navigation. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Trump's negotiating team should flat out say, you have no choice. This is an international waterway governed by international laws. Oman Iran, they don't have a say. Why Trump is saying that there is some sort of negotiating chip for this? I'll tell you why. He wants to save face. He wants to not be considered a failure in the Middle Eastern war here by saying, we had a peace agreement, everything is okay, we're going to move our ships out of the region, and we had an agreement that they can do some sort of tolling or some sort of processing fee or whatever, however they massage the word. So basically what Trump did was nullify maritime law and freedom of navigation, while no country in the world has that authority. The United States doesn't have that authority to absolve it, nor does Iran. This is an issue really at the UN, not Trump's negotiating team with Kushner and Witkoff. This is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. But what Trump is trying to do is, well, we have an agreement. They're gonna, have a processing fee. We'll leave, and everything's copacetic. Think about what Trump would have to do if we left the region with our military, and then all of a sudden Iran starts doing a toll. We're not going to go back, so we might as well just agree. That's how Trump's thinking. We might as well just agree to nullify the maritime law of freedom of navigation in that region. That way we save face and we don't have to go back. Because think about the other alternative. The other alternative would be forcing that the maritime law is in place. Then let's say there's peace in the region, it's stable. We leave the region, and all of a sudden Iran starts to threaten ships and force them to go into some sort of toll booth process. The United States is going to ship our Navy back. So this is a way to save face for Trump. Trump is an idiot. Now, we wouldn't have this problem if we actually went in and killed the IRGC, decapitated the theocratic regime, and leveled Tehran with gravity bombs. No, but Trump is too stupid and too afraid to do this. So now what Trump has done is he basically nullified maritime law and freedom of navigation. That's going to be a major problem in the Strait of Malaccas and in the region of the 9-dash line. Thank you, Trump, for screwing things up. Same thing with tariffs. He screwed things up. Now Amazon gets a rebate or a reimbursement for tariff prices. Did Amazon give back to their customers the higher fee that they had to pay? No. So this was corporatism. The taxation, the actual tariffs went to the corporations, and the corporations raised their prices, and the consumers had to pay it. So the corporations received the higher dollar value of the good that they were selling, or service, good, I guess, this good, on top of getting repayment from the federal government. When's the United States citizen going to get their reimbursement? So basically, more money went to the corporation, and because inflation's sticky, prices are sticky, the prices didn't go down. So you're still paying a higher price, even if there's not a tariff for that product. So Trump's trying to figure out a way to do more tariffs and screw it up even more. So in essence, the consumer had to pay for this. Trump issues tariffs, the companies pay the tariff to the government. They raise their prices, people buy their product, the money goes to the corporation to offset partially or fully the actual tariff cost. Prices are sticky, so they'll stay high. elevated, even if we don't have a tariff. The government received that their tariff money, and then all of a sudden SCOTUS says, nope, you gotta give it back. Okay, shouldn't that money have gone to the consumer if they paid the full amount? And if they didn't pay the full amount, a certain amount should have gone to the consumer and a certain amount should have gone to the corporation. Or it should have been stipulated that this money will go to the corporation and the company has to reimburse the actual customer for the amount that they paid in tariffs. If it was only 60%, then only 60% would be reimbursed to the customer. But that's not what's happening. The company is getting the full amount and not reimbursing the consumer. So in essence, the company made more profit. Bullshit, that's what's happening. And this is the reason why El Sayed, he's running for U.S. Senate for the state of Michigan. He won the primary for the Democratic Party. He's left-leaning, he's a progressive. He's technically not a DSA candidate, but he is definitely aligned with AOC and Bernie Sanders. He's not part of the establishment Democratic Party. This is what happens. People feel that the government is screwing them. And that's exactly what happened. Well, why doesn't, well, I haven't heard anyone from the media ask this question with Trump. Why should you reimburse the corporations for tariffs when they raise their prices and the consumers had to pay it? When are you going to give them their refund? When are you going to force the corporations to refund the consumers? It's corporatism at its finest. It's amazing. It's amazing what just happened. Something similar is happening with the Middle East. Trump's going to screw it up. And in the end, the consumer is going to be paying the difference. Because those tolls and the nullification of the freedom of navigation in that region is going to raise the price of oil, which will raise the price of distillates and gasoline. And guess who's going to be paying more? The consumer. Trump messing things up only makes it worse. Another classic example, look at what happened with the reflective pool. Trying to cut corners and speed up the process so it'd be all ready for the 4th of July. Poor quality in resurfacing the pool and trying to prevent the leakage. And it became a disaster. Once again, Trump intervened and screwed things up. Look at the White House. Leveled the East Wing for his ballroom, and I believe the ballroom should be put up through the proper channels. And now it's an eyesore. Trump, everything is in chaos with Trump. I am so sick of him. I'm so tired of it. Tired of it. What does he finish? What does he finish? When you ask most people will say they're not better off under Trump. They're about the same under Trump as under Biden. For most people. It's ridiculous. So my take on this whole Strait of Hormuz and the nullification of the freedom of navigation, unacceptable. And Trump isn't willing to go all the way. He's not willing to put the troops on the ground, take control of the strait, take control of the energy, destroy the infrastructure of Iran, and force them to capitulate and surrender. Surrender, not ceasefire, not armistice. Just total surrender. They need to lose. Iran needs to lose. No? Trump thinks that he's going to be able to be a super negotiator and save lives and all this. He makes deals that he doesn't have even power to do. The United States can't nullify freedom of navigation. This is an international law. Oh, Trump can do whatever he wants. Really? Trump has screwed things up big time, big time. All right, let's play Al Jazeera here. But before I do, please help support the work that I do by getting the great products that I offer. I have supplements that help to slow down the aging process and give you vitality and longevity. In addition, you can help support the work that I do by donating on my website. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel. All these videos for free to give you my insight on the market, on the news, and how to improve your health and wellness. It's really simple. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. You can use that discount as many times as you want when you reorder. And get the great supplements that I offer, such as ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root helps to control your cortisol levels and helps to control your blood glucose levels. And when you're doing that, you're helping your cardiovascular system, and you're also helping your immune system. Omega-3. Omega-3 is very important for your cardiovascular health. It'll help to bring down inflammation, help to control your lipid profile so you have lower LDL levels and higher HDL levels, so you have less plaque formation. And omega-3 helps to reduce over-clotting. So it helps to reduce the over-stickiness of your red blood cells. So your blood is flowing better. When you have better blood flow, when you have better cardiovascular health, you're going to be perfusing your brain better. That means that your brain function will improve. That's really important. When you have better blood flow, you're also going to have better blood flow through your kidneys. That's really important too. And your liver. So please take my advice. Get the omega-3. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Over the last 3-4 days.
John Bolton was a former US ambassador to the United Nations and served as National Security Advisor to President Trump during his first term. Even if there is a deal, he doubts Iran will stick to it for very long.
What Trump wants here has nothing to do with the geostrategic environment in the Middle East. He wants the price of gasoline to American consumers to come down. And I think what he seems to be agreeing to here is a 60-day pause that will not settle any outstanding differences, but will allow toll-free traffic to resume through the Strait of Hormuz, which could result in a lot of oil and gas coming out and during that period of time. So that I'm sure was the interest that the U.S. was following. And if this deal comes through and it lasts for 60 days, that will be a boost for Trump in his efforts to get gas prices to consumers in the U.S. down.
See,
this deal
Trump is not about solving the long-term issue. It's always these little micro steps. Little micro steps. What will help gasoline? What might help the stock market? What will help the bond market? Not solving the problem. And Trump needs to pay attention here. There's a curse coming. It's going to start on 9/11, 2026, and it's not going to end for 2 years. For 2 years. And it's going to affect the whole world. If Trump doesn't solve this problem in Iran, there's a 100% chance, 100% chance that there's going to be a lot of consternation in the world. 100% chance. He needs to solve the problem before 9/11/2026. And he's already lost the opportunity. When you deal with the soul roots of Esau and Jacob, the strength of Esau is starting. It's August, September, October, November, December, January. Then in February, Jacob is in control and goes all the way through July. So it's going to get harder and harder and harder as we approach 9/11/2026. And why is it that so many bad things happen in the West in October? That's the apex of the strength of Esau. And if you've been paying attention to the news, I've been saying for over a year that Esau, positive and negative soul root, has to be separated through a decapitation. What has Trump been saying in the news just the last 24 hours, 48 hours? I'm giving peace one last chance or decapitation. Oh, wait a minute, what is that all about? There's a metaphysical thing that's happening here. We, the United States, must kill the theocratic regime in the soul root of Iran. Esau has to be decapitated from a metaphysical point of view. Why? Because Esau is smart, but he also is an animal. You have to decapitate the intellect and the animal part to allow for the intellect, the head, to be buried with the patriarchs. Because the animal part is defiled and it can't be buried. So Esau was beheaded. So the head was allowed to be buried with his father and his mother. That is what's happening in this plane. We are re-echoing what has happened in biblical times. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but that's what's happening. And if you don't believe me, just pay attention to what Trump is saying. There is a direct link to what has happened that has been written down in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And it's expounded in the Zohar. So people really need to pay attention here. Really pay attention. Now, part of the curse is also going to affect Israel. Why? Because in 1960s, Israel was supposed to set up the Sanhedrin and it didn't. Why? Because Israel was set up as a liberal nation, not a religious nation. And so they decided not to set up the Sanhedrin. Fast forward to 2019. Red heifers were presented to Israel from Texas. I believe there were 5 of them. They can't slaughter them because there's no Sanhedrin. Oh, wait a minute here. Israel is going to be cursed for not setting up something that they should have been setting up for decades and have had plenty of chances to do it. These red heifers are special. The last time we've seen this was 2,000 years ago. This doesn't happen very often. So there's going to be a curse on Israel because of it. And the curse on the United States, you can see it's starting to emerge. You really think that our economy couldn't teeter into a recession or a depression? Pay attention. Pay attention to 1873. Pay attention to pay attention to 1890s. Pay attention to the tech bubble. Pay attention to what happened with Enron and Lehman. And what were some common characteristics that seem to be echoing in the circular financing world and the special purpose vehicles that all of these AI companies have created? Sounds really familiar. And then the freedom of navigation problem. Shortages of reserves for fertilizer, for distillates, for oil. Still think that something bad can't happen? It's starting to emerge. And then when you have the higher heat because of El Nino and the changing of the weather patterns, and there's more flooding in certain regions, crop yields could fail. Food shortage. Still think that a major curse can't happen?
For potential agreement? Well, I don't want to denigrate investors, but it's been hard to use markets as an indicator of what might happen next. I mean, we're on this roller coaster ride, and it's been tough to kind of predict what might happen that will take us in the next turn of events. But to your point, I mean, this deal, this agreement, whatever it might be, is very, very hard to characterize at the moment. And the focus really is not so much on a sort of ceasefire, but on the arrangements in the Strait of Hormuz, which remain quite fuzzy. So last night we did get an indication from the president that things seem to be moving along, at least in his view, in terms of after talking with the Qatari Emir, saying that there are progress in talks with Iran. Still unclear exactly who is conducting those talks and how those are going.
Well, they mentioned that the freedom of navigation needs to hold. Full stop. And if Iran keeps on playing games with the Strait, that they're going to get leveled with gravity bombs. I don't understand why we don't just completely level the southern coast of Iran and destroy Tehran. Why? Why can't we? Why? What's wrong with that? And control the oil infrastructure and use some of the profits to rebuild a constitutional republic for the Iranian people. That's what we should do. Now, Trump's afraid. Trump's afraid on everything. Mr. Bone Spurs, that wasn't willing to fight in the Vietnam War. Once again, this is what happens when you have a leader that is afraid. Kick the can down the road. It's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. But Trump thinks he knows better.
And threatening more violence in the Strait. So there's a lot still that remains unanswered, but we're watching with laser focus today to see if there's any movement on those sorts of talks and what agreement might come of it.
So certainly the Strait of Hormuz is first and foremost for a variety of reasons. But for President Trump, if you would ask him, he would probably say, we got to make sure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon.
That's right.
I'm not sure how you do that. Are there talks ongoing?
Yeah, this is the way you do it. You kill the enemy. That's how you do it. It's not that hard. Kill the enemy. You know, start finding a general that actually can win a war like General Grant. There were lots of generals during the Civil War that just couldn't fight or didn't want to fight. They were too political. And all of a sudden, he has Sherman and General Grant to end the war. Get it done. That's what we need. We need a Sherman. We need a General Grant to get the job done. Instead of like, well, we got these precision missiles at 4 million a pop. So what? You win in the war? No. So we can stop them from having nuclear weapons by winning the war. And we can stop this whole BS with the Strait of Hormuz by winning the war. See, Trump, just in case you're watching the show, you're probably not, but just in case, the only way this is going to work, is killing the enemy.
More moderate seen as, representatives from Iran to the U.S. talks, some stages ago. There's also, of course, you're right to point out the internal divisions. This has been a problem throughout the campaign and one that, Trump and other U.S. officials have conceded is tough to be up against is, just that there are so many voices within Iran and the regime is set up as such to allow for the IRGC to have military control. Obviously, the supreme leader has decision-making power, but then there's a lot of officials in between that might, leak things to press or try to be a part of the talks. And it's very hard to understand what the consistent message might be if there is one, and what the decision will come out to be, even amid all the rhetoric that's seeming to act against what the U.S. and others have seemed to be true.
Michelle, thanks so much for your reporting. Really appreciate it. Michelle Jamrisco, she's the White House and National Security Editor for Bloomberg News. She's down there in our Washington, D.C. bureau. And again, it's this.
Why can't the Bloomberg reporters say it should be unacceptable for Iran to negotiate international law of the freedom of navigation through straits? This should be a non-negotiable situation. See, what it is when it comes to economics, when you're only looking at it through an economic lens, as long as they keep it open and the oil's flowing, everything's going to be okay. Who cares about, what the negative things may happen down the road with supplanting international law. Just keep the strait open. Just keep the strait open. Just create a ceasefire. Do an armistice. Whatever. Just keep the market keep on going up. No, certain things you got to do right. Yeah, you know what? There may be pain, there may be suffering, but in the end, it's going to be better. No, Trump thinks that he can just negotiate away freedom of navigation. Why does he think he has that authority? Because he doesn't. See, Trump thinks that he's just master. He acts like he's a developer in New York, not the president of the United States. So I'd like him to grow up a little bit and actually get the job done. Do the decapitation, the whole world will be way better off. But he's afraid, and because he's afraid, he's not going to get it done. It's classic. Classic Trump. Classic Trump. All right, let's listen to MS Now. This is dealing with El Sayed winning the primary in Michigan, which is a problem because you're starting to see a very progressive and ultra-left wing of the Democratic Party taking control of power in local elections and in federal elections.
In the early hours of the morning, that it was going to be a little later in the morning, typically more.
I want to start on the ground with you, though, Allie, in Detroit, where we're waiting for some votes to come in. Some people expecting this race to be called perhaps a short time from now. What are you hearing?
I think that's exactly right, but we knew in the early hours of the morning that it was going to be a little later in the morning, typically Morning Joe, and way too early or as early as it gets. And yet here we are still waiting for the official race call. I do think that all signs at this point to El Sayed, and I have to say, throughout the night at Stevens HQ, it became clear that it was not going to be her night. There were moments where the folks who were at her election party were starting to leave around 9 o'clock. It starts looking like they're making a go of it. And of course, it was much closer than I think even some of those supporters early in the night thought that it was going to be. And that presents a real challenge as Democrats go forward here. As I was listening to those speeches that both of them gave around 1 o'clock in the morning last night, it was striking then, and it's more striking now, the ways that they both seem so eager to pivot to the general election. And in large part, that's because this primary itself has been so bruising. And I have heard so many hurt feelings on both sides when it comes to allies and supporters of theirs in Democratic ranks in official politics, but then also when I was talking to voters throughout the day yesterday, Willie, I think there is a lot of healing yet to be done. And that is one of the things that, frankly, Democrats on both sides of this race are concerned about as they try to turn the page and head into the next chapter of the general election. I think that's going to be something for us to watch very closely as Michigan Democrats are set to have unity meals, a unity breakfast, of course, on Thursday and then more on Friday. There is so much pressure, I think, to heal the divides that have been made from what was a just bruising primary. It's going to be a pretty awkward meal. I think they're going to have a lot of work to do. But I think when I talk to voters, one of the things that I was looking for is, what does it say about that adage of vote blue no matter who? It's something that I've heard for years on the campaign trail, but something that voters yesterday were just actively grappling with as they cast their ballot. Many of them, almost all of them that I talked to, went in, decided for who they were going to vote for. They had a lot of reasons for that, and all of them were values-based. And so I think that it shows that if you're Abdul El Sayed reaching out to Black voters, the same voters that were really the Stevens campaign hoping they were going to power them in places like here in Detroit and Wayne County. And I think when we look at the margins this morning, they just are not where they likely need to be for Stevens to be the winner and make up the gap that still exists there. I think the other thing I was asking voters, Willie, is what does it say if El Sayed wins? And one voter gave me this answer that I think will be instructive as we look ahead to the next 13 or so weeks of this race. Watch.
I think it's going in the right direction if he wins. I think it's where we need to go, especially with Trump on his way out of office. We need to get the people who matter in the office, who's going to make the right decisions for our country.
There are some people who say, well, Abdul is not as electable in November. What do you say to them?
That's BS. That's BS. He has the credentials. He has the smarts. He has the values. So for me, it's the little guy that, that is always going to be the overcomer. So he's electable to me.
So it's
Whoa.
What's that?
I just built a budgeting app in Base 44.
Guys, you just built an app.
Impossible. You're gonna kick.
So it's mending divides that might have been born from this primary, but then also on Abdul El-Sayed's part, convincing voters, not just those that didn't vote for him because of a misalignment of values or politics, but also because they just want to win in this place. Now that it's the general, now that it's about Trump and Rogers and Republicans, Michigan Democrats I've talked to say, all right, I just want a fighter who can win the state.
Ali Vitale in Detroit this morning. Ali, thanks as always. So, Ron, this race has been sort of painted as a snapshot of what might be happening nationally in the Democratic Party, but really today and this morning it is about the state of Michigan. So given all your background, your experience there in Michigan, what are you watching play out there right now?
Well, I'm watching the revenge of the embattled establishment versus the march of radical populists, which is basically what we're seeing nationwide in the Democratic Party. And will we have a mirror image of the Republican Party? Is this going to be a partial takeover in the next couple of election cycles, like the Tea Party in 2009, or a full takeover of radical populists like we had with the MAGA movement in 2016?
So, Ron, talk a little bit about, if you would, about Abdul El-Sayed. Obviously, there's been this national attempt in the state of Michigan to paint him as a radical, and I think some people do not disagree, obviously, with his views on Israel, for example. He has some things to answer for there. But what kind of public servant has he been? What kind of candidate has he been? And then what kind of, potentially, United States Senator would he be for Michigan?
Now, I use the word radical in the sense of populism, that both parties, because of how dysfunctional our politics are and how weak our economy and our way of life is in America now, that there's push from both extremes to have a more populist movement. Abdul Sayed is as a public servant, relatively untested. He's been a public health doctor in Wayne County in Detroit. Wayne County is the main county here in the state. As a politician, one of the most talented political athletes I've ever seen, and I covered Bill Clinton in Arkansas, in Washington. He's charismatic. He's on message. He knows how to connect with people in big arenas in Detroit. And I'm up here in northern Michigan. I've seen him in small libraries in red counties connecting with folks. He's very ambitious. He's very mission and values driven. He's somebody to watch, whether he wins or loses today. He's the type of candidate that's the future of the Democratic Party, for better or worse.
Ron, good morning. Ron, good morning. Good to see you. Michigan, talk to us about the state of Michigan. It went twice for Trump, though he lost it in 2020. Republicans who were pretty pessimistic across much of the country this fall, they like Mike Rogers, they like Michigan, and frankly, they'll tell you, privately anyway, this would be the race. If Abdul El-Sayed was to win, this would be the race they feel better about. Talk to us about how Michigan shapes up as a general election state and the strength or weaknesses of Rogers' candidacy.
The Republicans are spinning you. If Abdul El-Sayed wins this race, he's coming out of it with huge momentum. He's got all the headwinds or the wind to his back because of how poorly President Trump has delivered for the people of the state of Michigan. Yep. He promised to bring down inflation on day one. He promised to have no more forever wars. He promised to fight for us and not fill his own pockets. And now here we are with an election. And Mike Rogers, for as modern as he was years ago in a different time, and for as incredible of a record as he has, and for as formidable of a candidate as he can be, he's tied to President Trump. And that is not a good place to be in this election cycle anywhere in purple and blue states, but especially in a state like Michigan that puts so much.
Trump has failed. Manufacturing jobs, not as many as he said he was going to happen. He stated that there are far more people employed now than ever in American history. That's not true. It's just slightly higher, not far more. If you don't believe me, take a look at the data. All you got to do is use your LLM and it'll tell you. He screwed up on the tariffs, and who's getting reimbursed are the companies, not the customer, not the end user, not the end customer. That's crazy. The debt, the yields are going up. He's afraid to actually get the war done. We could have destroyed Iran, absolutely destroyed, and had troops on the ground and controlled the strait in the first 3 to 4 weeks of the war. Trump was afraid. So he screwed that up too. There's going to be a complete voters in the midterms are so pissed off that the Republicans are going to lose seats in the House and in the Senate, and I'm very concerned that the Democratic Party is going to be in control. But Trump did it to himself because he thought he knew better.
In the basket of Donald Trump has been disappointed.
Yeah, Ron, it's Sam Stein here. First of all, it's great to talk to you. I do agree on the macro stuff that you're talking about. I know you're in the reporting and observation game, but for a second, put yourself in the strategist's headspace. Let's say he does eat this out, and it looks sort of like he will. Obviously, there's some things he has to do, even with those good macro trends, to better position himself for the general. What would you suggest are the first steps he makes in that general election context?
At first, I'm out of the journalism game. I appreciate that you still are.
Fair enough.
I'm going to put on a hat that I wear all day now. Okay. First, he has to not change too much. Don't play this old game of running to the middle. He has a message that will resonate with the people of Michigan. I'm going to put money in your pocket. I'm going to take it out of politics, and I'm going to give you health care. That's not a radical position. That's right in the mainstream. Secondly, for as charismatic as he is, for as talented as he is, he has a tendency to come across, and I would tell him this personally, coming across sometimes a little too condescending, a little too cool for school. He needs to keep in mind that he's speaking to all Michiganders now, not just the base. I'm telling you, he's got the potential for doing it. I see him doing it on the smaller scale, especially up here, like you say, in northern Michigan. But he needs to moderate his tone a little bit, but not moderate his message. And obviously, you have the tropes. He's got to reach out to A.B. Stevens voters. He's got to spend even more time in Detroit to make sure he brings black voters across. But I don't think he's going to have a problem with that. Again, independent voters and Democratic voters in the state are tired of Trumpism, tired of MAGAism, and they're dying to vote for anybody who's going to give them a different direction.
Ron, I want to pick up on that. As John mentioned, the state of Michigan voted for Donald Trump twice in 2016, and they kind of left him in 2020, voted for Joe Biden, came back to him in 2024. You say they're fed up with MAGAism in the state of Michigan, but it still seems like the margins are pretty close. What is the feeling among, let's say, independents right now about Donald Trump and this administration?
It's the same as it is around the country. They're sick of it. They're tired of Trump. The polls show you that. Now, Democrats can't get too heady about this because just 2 years ago, independents were for Donald Trump in the state, in a lot of states. A couple years before that, they were for Democrats. Independents, a lot of voters are swinging back and forth because they're not happy with what they're getting from either one of these parties in the duopoly, and they're looking for something new. That's why 10 years ago, Donald Trump, a failed businessman and a reality TV star, looked like a good bet because he was different from the status quo. Abdul Syed, a Muslim, a ultra progressive, somebody with not much of a public service record, is different. He's not for the status quo. He, like a lot of populists on the far left and the far right, are against, I'll put it this way, he shares a lot of attributes with MAGA voters and MAGA leaders, against the status quo, against the establishment, against anything that is holding us back this last 2 decades.
and a critical seat for Democrats to hold on to if they have any hopes, obviously, of taking the Senate.
Is about their, I guess, stalled merger with Warner Brothers Discovery and how they plan to operate as a single entity over the next 12 months.
So their numbers yesterday, Paul, were actually pretty decent, and a lot of that was just the cost savings from the Skydance, acquisition.
The results are in. Decision Desk HQ has called the Democratic Michigan Senate primary race for Abdul El-Sayed. These results coming in just within the hour.
Take a look, the tight race until the end between El-Sayed and challenger Haley Stevens. A little over 1% difference between the two. Notably, Mallory McMorrow, who dropped out of the race in early July, received 4% of the vote. But despite the slow results, McMorrow made her call earlier this morning, writing in a post on X, "Congratulations to Abdul El-Sayed on winning the Michigan Democratic primary to be our nominee for U.S. Senate. Abdul has my full endorsement and support." She continued, "This was a brutal primary, believe me, I know. And Trump and Mike Rogers are counting on us to stay divided. Let's prove them wrong by beating Mike Rogers and taking our country back."
Well, it was much closer than expected.
Yeah.
The polls had El-Sayed winning very decisively, and here he's winning by a 1.5 basically. That's probably good news for Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate. Has to be thinking that my polls showed me up slightly against El-Sayed anyway. So if the polls were massively overcounting the El-Sayed support out there, maybe this could be a pickup for me. He is, as I said over and over again, a just very extreme candidate. He'd be one of the farthest left people ever elected to the Senate, maybe the farthest left person ever elected to the Senate, period. And can you run someone like that in a purple state, in a state that voted for Donald Trump twice? That's what we'll find out. There got to be some Haley Stevens voters who he'll be making a pitch for their vote, and he should be reminding Mike Rogers should be reminding voters in the state at all times that El-Sayed is buddy, and his chief surrogate was someone who thinks America deserved 9/11. So I'd be saying that over and over and over again until I'm blue in the face, and then we'll see. But credit where it's due. This is a big win for. I know you keep saying he's not officially part of the DSA.
He's not.
He's a socialist left candidate.
And so he's the one who
it's a huge win for there's a log in from my face. It's a huge win for their movement, because this is the first time you actually had a statewide race, moderate, centrist, establishment supported, AIPAC supported liberal versus far left candidate, and look who won.
I think it's important to say that he hasn't officially aligned with the DSA, but still is a progressive candidate, because look at someone like Bernie Sanders. You know what I mean? This is somebody who wants more medical coverage for folks.
Bernie Sanders
who wants to.
Democratic socialist.
Okay.
I don't know whether you're part of the group or not.
Okay, but the group actually are the people that are going on television and creating havoc for candidates or people in positions like Mamdani and candidates running like Abdul El-Sayed. So by not claiming to be part of that group, you can say, listen, you guys want to get rid of police departments? I don't. I still want these policies to be implemented that are progressive, but not to get rid of police departments. And I think that's a distinct thing that we have to separate, because some of the things that the DSA leadership is going on television saying is making folks uncomfortable and messing it up for candidates that actually have good ideas. My estimation of what happened and why the race was so close was because perhaps people in Michigan weren't as alarmed by the distinct differences that we as the national media saw between these two candidates. And there are some, as you know, when they think about it at home, when they think about the candidates the options that Haley Stevens presented on the table and El-Sayed presented, they're like, okay, you guys both want to push for more money in our pockets. Haley Stevens has a different way to get there. She wants to talk about the automobile industry more. Abdul El-Sayed wants to make sure that corporations aren't taking advantage of us, talking about union workers more. You guys both want to get us more health insurance and health care on a federal level. And so these are conversations that both of them are having. The distinct difference was about funding for Israel and where they stand on that issue. Obviously, Haley Stevens has accepted a lot of money from AIPAC, not directly, but organizations attached to AIPAC, and El Sayed has not and has criticized her for that.
Yeah, that's the litmus test in this race, clearly.
So the harder sell, I think, would have been for El Sayed supporters to go over to Haley Stevens, not for Haley Stevens supporters to go over to El Sayed, because at the end of the day, their policies are extremely similar. And what they would like to do outside of him just arguing that he wants to bring more jobs back to the automobile industry, he might still want to do that, but didn't make that a flagship part of his campaign. I mean, would you prefer Mike Rogers, a Republican, in office? Because if you do, that means that you like a mirror, pretty much reflection of what's already happening in government, and you think that Republican policies that are implemented by this administration are working, because it's a vote for what's happening and the status quo to continue.
Chose Donald Trump as president, so clearly they're not opposed to the Republican Party's agenda. Mike Rogers is a very moderate Republican.
He's not going to push back against President Trump. He's not going to go in there and really ruffle feathers. Everybody knows.
Do they want someone to push back on Donald Trump? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Do they like being broke? I mean, look at the economy, Ron. We have to address.
We're going to be broke once we.
We have to address what's happening. People are upset right now that the Iran war is still ongoing, or maybe stopped or paused, but oil is held up. It's above $70 a barrel. I mean, gas prices are high. People are upset that grocery costs are high. Inflation, that fertilizer is costing more for farmers, so they can't go to the grocery store and get things, fruits, vegetables at the same cost that they might have a couple months ago, or even when Biden was in office. People are not just taking this lightly, especially when President Trump campaigned as the businessman in chief that was going to do something totally different than we've seen. So people are naturally frustrated. So when you talk about all that Republican support, is it still there? Are people going to think that Mike Rogers, who's right down the middle, is going to just hold the status quo pretty much, is going to be the person to get in office, or do they want a dramatic change? It doesn't mean that Michigan has to turn into this widely blue state. It just means let's try something else. The same people who were in Michigan that maybe didn't love the president's demeanor and the way that he addressed folks and didn't like his behavior still wanted the policies because they wanted to try something new. Like you said, they put Trump in office. So perhaps they are looking at what they chose and say, let's try something else.
Maybe. I mean, really what this is about is who's going to have control of the Senate. Democrats need to pick up a number of seats, 4 seats, while not losing anyone. So this would be a seat they'd lose if El Sayed proves to be a significantly weaker candidate than Haley Stevens, which appears to be the case. I don't know. His side seems very, obviously they won, so they should be happy about this. And it, even before we called it just now, all evening, late into the evening, all morning, it looked like he was going to pull it out. But if the polls he released showed him winning by 10, 15, or more points. He's going to win by 1 point, which is close. It's going to make people think, wow, maybe if Mallory McMorrow, who is the third candidate in the race, she dropped out. She's getting 4%, and she's presumably closer to Haley Stevens than she is to Abdul El Sayed. She should have gotten out sooner and or been more explicit about, hey, my voters, you should vote for Haley Stevens. Could have been a different race. I mean, could have, should have, would have, doesn't matter now. He's the candidate, so.
Well, I think anybody is going to put out.
I mean, Hassan
look at the polls and the best polls and share those with folks.
Well, it was not a good poll.
But there were 2 formidable candidates. Haley Stevens, we went from only pretty much on this show talking about Abdul El Sayed to with Morrow dropping out, and then Haley Stevens slowly, it came from her accent, and not that we were talking about the national news media, like this new person that came on the scene but had all this, personality and big energy that matched people in Michigan, and then kept going from there. And her national profile rose more and more as we kept seeing her more and more. And so over the last few weeks, we've seen her support grow, and then we watched those scales change and tip a little bit as she got more support. So I'm not that surprised that she polled so closely, because people started to get to know her, found her very likable and interesting. And so that's why I think people in Michigan maybe were actually conflicted and actually had some place where they were like, I'm not really sure which way I want to go. And perhaps they weren't that turned off by El Sayed, but they were interested, more people, in like what Haley Stevens had to say.
Well, if they weren't that turned off by him, there's still time, because Hassan Piker's
He's not
out there saying
he's not Hassan Piker.
You're right. Hassan Piker is now in Wisconsin, speaking on behalf of the Thanksgiving hater, Francesca Hong, trying to prop her up, talking about all the radical communist victory party, what that will look like once they've won. That's what people want. Then I can't stop them. But maybe they're enough. Maybe, who knows? There are enough sane Democrats who can say, I can't participate in this nonsense. I don't want to be affiliated with it. I'll just stay home. I can't vote for Republican. Fine. I'll just stay home.
I love that we're talking about sanity because that leads perfectly into what I'm talking about next in my lens. Ohio Congressman Max Miller is rejecting calls to resign.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nail silver lozenges. You can get it in Manuka honey or orange splash fortified with vitamin C. It's made from structural nail silver. It'll help to neutralize. Perfect for the allergy season, the cold season, and cleaning around the house. Please go to my store and get the structural nail silver lozenges. Magnesium and zinc helps to boost up the immune system and helps with brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with the immune system, boosts up brain function, and helps to improve your skin. You drink filtered water, take the vitamin C and magnesium. This vitamin C will cross-link with the collagen and improve your dermal layer. It's a great way to improve skin health. Probiotics. You can get it in the powdered form or the veggie cap form. With a good probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients more efficiently, improve your immune system, reduce inflammation, reduce leaky gut syndrome, reduce the chances of food allergies, and by having a good gut biome, you're going to improve your brain function. You're going to be able to sleep better. And by sleeping better, you're consolidating memory, detoxifying your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. Probiotics also help with skin health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. It's a great way to get healthy. And again, brain function is really important. Now what we're going to do is Hassan Picker, endorsed DSA candidate, maybe the craziest yet. This is the National Review, so let's listen to it.
Hey everyone, we may have the craziest DSA candidate yet.
You talked about your past positions that he keeps highlighting and, obviously likely would continue to do so before November should you win. One thing that they brought up as well was a post from you in 2021 where you said Americans should cancel Thanksgiving, should have done this in 1621. The post has been deleted. Republicans have been highlighting it. Do you still believe that Thanksgiving should be canceled?
Hey everyone, I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that was Francesca Hong, DSA gubernatorial candidate out in Wisconsin, winning in the Democratic primary there in the polls, going away. The election is about in a week, and she was interviewed by Caitlin Collins at CNN about her outlandish views on Thanksgiving. Going to come back to that, but this is such an interesting phenomenon because this is a candidacy that's not being driven by the persona or the political skills of the candidate. No, it is her core lunatic views that are so appealing to Democratic primary voters out there. I want to get into those views some more and what is the worldview that ultimately undergirds them. First of all, more on Thanksgiving. This is her original tweet. Cancel Thanksgiving. Should have done this in 1621. If it takes a worldwide pandemic for us to realize we should stop celebrating colonialism and the original super spreader event that killed indigenous folks, misspelled there, but hey, we all nod on Twitter occasionally. And women, so be it. Okay, well, a couple problems with that. One, Thanksgiving was about marking a genuine moment of togetherness with the settlers and the Native Americans. Now, it didn't last, but it lasted for a period of years. And the holiday, though, was supposed to be about marking the positives at that time. And it's not about spreading disease. The settlers didn't realize they were spreading disease. It was a terrible tragedy, obviously, but not the kind of moral offense that she's implying there. And Thanksgiving, at the end of the day, is supposed to be about celebrating the abundance that God has provided for us on this continent. But clearly, that's not the way Hong thinks about it. Let's go back to that CNN interview where she's asked about this old ex-post.
I'm a chef, and one of the first meals that I made that was for the community when I was 16 was a Thanksgiving meal. Now, I always think my hospitality background in owning a restaurant for 7-8 years, that bringing folks around the table to share conversation and build community is always a good thing. But Thanksgiving is also a time that's incredibly painful for many people in our communities. And so I think I wanted to make sure that people understood that there are multiple views, but views can evolve. And the position that I'm running for right now, and I think my background as a chef, will actually help me become a better governor that's able to bring more people to the table.
Okay, now bringing people together for a meal.
The hiding spot in the next video has to be next level.
What if it's all doors? Hundreds of doors. Yeah, like you're in one of them.
I like this.
Where are we going to get 100 doors?
Door store? We don't have to.
Okay, now bringing people together for a meal, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that, obviously. It can be a wonderful thing. But Thanksgiving is about more than that. It's about expressing gratitude for our country and to our God. Again, that's an element of the holiday that apparently is lost on her. And the idea that this is extremely painful event annually for lots of communities across America. No, maybe for a few select people who choose to experience it that way, or activists who hate it for various ideological and political reasons. But no, for most people, it's a wonderful day and the greatest, perhaps, American tradition. As for being a chef, nothing wrong with that, can be a wonderful thing, but it's not actually a qualification for being governor of a major state. And then you look at this whole answer. She says that people can change their minds. Certainly true. In fact, that's a truism. But she doesn't say specifically that she changed her mind on this issue. So on top of the underlying extremism, this is a very slippery answer. We've seen the same kind of thing on her views on defunding the police. Here she is originally a couple of years ago saying we need to dismantle police systems.
Police officers enforce the law with state-sanctioned violence and then get excused for violating people's rights because they aren't expected to know the law. Minneapolis police spent nearly $5 million implementing trainings, increasing diversity, repairing to strengthen trade relationships between cops and communities. It didn't work. And each city should have local control of how they dismantle their police systems to rebuild new community control systems rooted in preventative care and reducing harm. Defund the police, protect Black lives, and build a care community. This is what we need.
Now here she is on the podcast Pod Save America trying to get out of this one.
Your 2020 posts supporting defunding the police, quote, as a first step towards abolishing the police, which in a separate post you said, quote, exists to uphold white supremacy. Now, I know you've said you're not running to defund the police. It's not something you can do as governor, and that people's views can evolve. I'm wondering how your views on policing have evolved since 2020.
My views have only become stronger in that I'm serious about public safety, and I will not abolish the police. My views are that people are struggling right now and need basic needs met. And I want to focus on stopping violent crime and giving law enforcement the resources and the training that they need, but ensure that we are also holding accountable law enforcement that does not follow the law.
So that's a pretty good line of questioning, actually. And if you take it in isolation, there's nothing objectionable about what she's saying there, sentence to sentence, but I find changes of mind most persuasive when someone explains in some detail why they changed their mind. And she doesn't do any of that. She just asserts all of a sudden she has a more politically palatable view without going back and telling us why she used to believe something that is the opposite. So you got to mark this one in incomplete. She is not showing any genuine change of view in my mind here. And then there's the crazy things she said about race, including this old tweet. And this is a Hall of Fame woke tweet right here. I ate 2 bites of my kid's cheeseburger at Culver's in Black River Falls and told him they ran out of ice cream, mostly just wanted to leave because I was on the verge of an anxiety attack. Too many old white people who didn't think we spoke English. This is so weird. Who starts wolfing down their kids' food at a fast food place because they're people of the wrong race around or white people around? Same thing with lying about the availability of ice cream. That should be some sort of serious moral offense unless you have really good reason to do it. And a race panic is not a good reason, but there's more where this comes from.
I wasn't always aware of the struggles of other communities of color because for me, assimilation always kind of took over. And so I did marry. My proximity to whiteness continues, right? My son is biracial. He's half white and half Korean, and I think navigating, what his identity is and how people perceive him is always at the back of my mind as well.
Again, putting aside the toxic worldview here, this is just so strange. Who talks about the man she marries in these terms? If she's about to say, "I married a white man," she kind of catches herself. And then talks about her son in terms of being in proximity to whiteness. As far as I can tell from the context here, she's saying this kind of undermines her own victimhood or sympathy with other people of color who are supposedly victims. Let's hope her son never sees that one. But she's clearly, as so many of these DSA candidates are, totally obsessed with race.
Producing legislation to add Asian Americans to school curricula when in terms of, adding us on to American Indians, Black Americans, and Hispanics in terms of citizenship requirements for what needs to be in curriculum for school boards, going back to making sure that talking about racial identity and the role of race is ubiquitous in classrooms.
A couple things about this one. One, the idea that kids in American classrooms aren't being taught about race is completely wrong and out of touch. Two, the last thing they need is more race-based instruction, certainly from the woke perspective that Hong is talking about here. So, as I said at the top, she's not a great candidate. I think you probably have seen that in some of these clips. I want to underline that point, though, because again, I think it's important to this phenomenon with this clip where she's talking to reporters on the campaign trail about her past views on the police.
Why do you believe that the police must always?
At Capital Group, we design our active ETFs to weather the ups and downs of the market so they can be rooted at the core of the portfolio. They're meticulously crafted to endure. Capital Group, actively different, active ETFs.
Discover Legoland New York this summer. Experience wild rides and the return of Lego Festival with 5 unique zones. Stay at the Legoland Hotel and don't miss the Ferrari.
Why do you believe that the police must still exist?
Still existing because the reality of this moment and in the types of public safety systems that we have, I want us to be sensible and realistic, but we know now that the billions invested in the criminal legal system is not working. We are spending on incarcerating an individual more than tuition for UW-Madison. That, this is about making sure that local law enforcement is working with community, that we are taking resources from the state and investing in things like public education, victim services, out of school programs for our kids to go and have a great, be able to be themselves. These are things that data and facts have shown that prevent crime.
That's so bad. There's a real Kamala Harris word salad element to that. And that was just the first part of the clip. She went on like that for some time. Now look, I'm an objective enough person and political analyst. I can realize, even though I don't like AOC, there's nothing she says that I agree with. She is a person with genuine political talent and charisma. There's a reason she's become a national figure so quickly. Graham Plattner, a loathsome person. You wouldn't want to have anything to do with this guy, but had a certain sociopathic, rough charm or charisma to him. None of that here with Hong. She reminds me a little bit of the eccentric, socially isolated person you see at a public library who's a low talker and who's using the computer there during the day. That's what her persona is. So she's not rocketing to the top of the polls in the Wisconsin gubernatorial race because of her personality. And she's ahead, again, by about 20 points in the latest poll. And the person who was in second place in that poll just dropped out. So it's not her persona. It is her worldview that Democrats in Wisconsin are finding so compelling. And if you look at that, this is not the old socialism where you're a socialist and you want to nationalize some industries and you want Medicare for all. Views I reject, but we could have an honest argument about those. No, this is something deeper and more profound kind of critique of America. She rejects Thanksgiving, our great national festival. She believes the criminal justice system and the police in America are fundamentally corrupt and racist, and she's obsessed with race and clearly believes the United States itself is corrupt to the core and based on systems of oppression. So this is a thoroughgoing, radical critique of the United States of America as such, and she's not winning despite these views. She is winning because of them, and that's extremely disturbing. Hey, by the way, comment, like, subscribe. I promise you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.
Goes back to what I've been saying. These Democrats, especially left of center or ultra left of center, they are aligned to relativism, not aligned to the Enlightenment. And because of that, anything goes, and it's all this multicultural stuff, and everyone's opinion must be equally weighted and all this, and that you have to be cognizant of all the microaggressions in the world and all this stuff. No. Our country, the United States, is built on the Enlightenment. We have a constitutional republic, and it's based on life, liberty, and property rights. These Democrat, socialists, and left of center types, they aren't in line with this foundation of the United States. It's God, country, and family. God, country, and family. Not the demonization of Thanksgiving. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free, and if you take my advice, you're going to be able to make some money in the market and get healthy. Vitamin B complex is super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. The first 4 B vitamins helps with the electron transport chain to boost up the health of your mitochondria so you have more energy, more ATP, which is a major energy source. As you age, your mitochondria ages, you don't have as much energy. This is going to help boost up that energy. In addition, your cellular metabolism will improve, and you'll be able to protect your neurons, which is really important, through vitamin B12. Digestive enzyme complex helps to reduce the load on your pancreas. This is important if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Because your pancreas doesn't function as well, even if you're healthy. So you need to give it a little bit of help and a little bit of rest. So digestive enzyme complex is going to help to break up the carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So you're digesting your food, you're going to be able to absorb them better, less digestive stress. And digestive enzyme complex has bromelain in it that helps with clots, helps to reduce clots. Olive leaf extract, dual purpose, helps to boost up the immune system and helps with your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps to control your lipid profile. When you do that, you're reducing plaque buildup. And when you have better blood flow, you also have better brain function. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression. It also helps to get rid of cells that are in senescence. Resveratrol soaks up free radicals and helps the health of the mitochondria so you have more energy. And resveratrol, taking it regularly, will also help with your basal layer, especially if you stack it with C60, so your skin will improve, because that basal layer for your skin is where your new skin cells are generated. So stack resveratrol with the C60, and taking resveratrol regularly is going to help to slow down the methylation of your genes. What does that mean? That means it's slowing down aging. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the supplements, take them regularly, slow down the aging process. Amazing. Let's listen to Fox News.
We have a major call to make on this Fox News alert on a major race out of Michigan that could reset the race for November, and the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. Abdul El-Sayed, age 41, ran for governor 8 years ago, unsuccessful against Gretchen Whitmer. This time, a winner against Haley Stevens. The Associated Press has made the call, and El-Sayed now will take his campaign head-to-head with the Republican Mike Rogers in November, and that will be one to watch. Wow. Dana's out today. I'm Bill Hemmer, live here in New York City as we roll on. Been waiting on it. Now we have it, Aish.
We have it. It is a major shakeup, I think, for establishment Democrats who are backing Haley Stevens. I might ask me. The other question is, how did the polls get it so wrong? This guy was up by double digits, Bill, and now we're looking at a 1-point lead, winning this primary by just 1 point. And is this a big wake-up call that El-Sayed needs to be more compromising, perhaps, from now on, as he does have a lot of independents in that state, a lot of centrists in that state to win over if he's going to make it into the general?
So this is what he campaigned on: Medicare for all, no military aid to Israel, tax the rich, reform ICE, abolish the filibuster in the Senate if he wins, and campaign finance reform. So we've been watching Michigan, and this is the check mark we've been waiting for either Stevens or Syed. Mallory McMorrow dropped out of this race weeks ago. She picked up 4% of the vote. You see the margin? It's 1 percentage point. You just wonder, had she endorsed or not been at all, or dropped out some time ago and her name did not appear on the ballot, maybe this would have been different. But here is the case now. Haley Stevens wrote a wave of support on behalf of AIPAC, upwards of $30 million to take down Syed, and Syed has defeated that brushback pitch against him in this campaign. And we talked about Wayne County. She won it by 6 points. That's Detroit. That's kind of where she needed to be. Up in Oakland County, she won it by almost 7 points. Pretty impressive where she needed to be. Macomb County, up by 7.5 points, where she needed to be. But Syed was driving up numbers in different parts of the state. Very good down here in Washington for his campaign, almost 25 points in the victory. And out here in Grand Rapids, a bit of a surprise here in Kent County. He won the county by 61 points. A lot of smaller colleges in that part of the state. And really, this is, it used to be Gerald Ford country. But the demographics have changed in Michigan. That's where Ford's presidential library is. Been a hotbed for Republicans for a long time, and nobody knows that better than my guest right now, Ronna McDaniel, former head of the RNC. Ronna, what does this victory mean, not in a blue dot district in New York City, but in a purple state of Michigan?
Oh, I think this is going to energize Republicans. Republicans who have been dormant a lot in the past few midterms, have sat out midterms, have not paid attention to the midterms, and suddenly they are awake and aware of the threat of the most dangerous ticket that Democrats have ever put forward. Not just with Syed. They have an attorney general nominee, a Soros-backed attorney general nominee named Ali Sabat. Their Supreme Court nominees are radical. They are running on things like putting violent criminals back on the street. They have put violent criminals back on the street. So the ticket up and down on the Democrat side is very dangerous. And I think this might be the shot on the arm Republicans need to engage in a midterm where we haven't been engaging in the past 2 cycles.
Okay, Ron, I should have mentioned you're from Michigan, so you know the state very well.
Yeah.
Ronna, think about this right now in the battle for the Senate, okay? We've been using this in our power rankings for some time. Keep in mind, Democrats right now, they need to flip 4 seats that Republicans currently hold. But one of the seats that was leaning Democrat was Michigan. And how do you look at that right now? If this is considered maybe a toss-up or even a lean toward Republicans, that makes this challenge in Alaska, Iowa, Maine, and Ohio so much more difficult. But just take the Michigan case right now. If Mike Rogers were to take that seat from the Democrats, they need to go elsewhere in order to take control of the Senate. It seems at the moment that it's a much more difficult climb. How do you see it?
I absolutely agree. I mean, Chuck Schumer and the Democrat establishment, they were all in for Haley Stevens. She spent $60 million on TV. Syed spent $6 million on TV, and they wanted her to be their nominee because this disrupts their path to the Senate. And one other thing, Bill, Michigan's a straight party ticket state. So you go vote R at the top of the ticket, or one of 8 that still employs this. This helps us with the House too, in districts like Tom Barrett, where they elected a DSA candidate against him last night. So this is going to help us across the board, not just in Michigan, but nationwide for prospects for Republicans in these midterms.
Mike Rogers was on the air about 2.5 hours ago. Now, this is what his race was against Alyssa Slotkin. He lost, but only lost by 0.3 percentage points. It was that close. And Ronna, many people were saying that the reason it was that so close is because of what Donald Trump did all over these rural areas in the Upper Peninsula. Do you think Mike Rogers runs this well in a race with Donald Trump's name not on the ballot?
When Donald Trump's on the ballot, more Michiganders turn out. It's just a fact. That's why it's harder in the midterms. That being said, Mike had a competitive primary challenge last time. He didn't. The competitive primary challenge has been on the Dem side this time in August. So now they've got to unite and try and mobilize. And let's see if these Haley Stevens voters come out for Al Sayed. It has expanded the Republican map on who we can reach. I know, Bill, even in this primary, Republicans were crossing over to vote for Haley Stevens. They were that afraid of Al Sayed. I was knocking doors over the weekend in high propensity Republican areas, and they were skipping the Republican primary altogether, because in Michigan you can do that, and they were pulling a Democrat ballot to vote for Haley Stevens. That's how afraid of Al Sayed they were. So I think this absolutely puts Mike on the map.
So he has campaigned with Hassan Piker, right? Hassan Piker said America deserved 9/11. I'm from Ohio. I don't think Michigan's that different from Ohio. No. I don't know how it's going to fly, but go ahead and roll this soundbite number 3. Watch it.
Do you see I'm lowering my ask to just $1 today, and here's why. This Senate race in Texas is likely going to be the most.
Do you see a progressive lane materializing that goes through Michigan for 2028 after tonight?
Absolutely. But it's not just Michigan. This is just the beginning. These are never supposed to be swing states, and they will never be swing states ever again if I have something to do with it. We will hopefully continue this movement all across the United States of America. We'll go to every single state.
Here's what's going to happen, Ronna. Every Democrat's going to be asked whether or not they can support this. It's already happening, even before the vote yesterday. There's a Democratic congresswoman running in Kent County that I just showed. She said, there's no way I can get behind Syed.
Right.
And she's Democrat now. Now, yesterday we had Debbie Dingell on. I've known Debbie Dingell for decades. And she took a different position. She said, if Syed wins, we must get behind him because we have to take back the Senate. I know Debbie Dingell is a friend of Israel. These are cross currents that I don't think the party has seen or experienced just yet. And we're about to find out how it goes. How do you see that one?
And he barely won, Bill. So this was going to be this runaway train, and he barely won. And you know what he did? He doubled down on his extreme rhetoric because he brought Hassan Piker into campaign with him in the closing days. He brought this guy who said we deserve 9/11 into campaign with him. This is who Al Sayed is. But I want to do a little cautionary tale here. Republicans can't just say socialism or communism. We need to call these people what they are. They're anti-America. They're running on an agenda to get rid of our Constitution, the socialist movement, to get rid of the U.S. Senate. They are saying, Syed has said, Gaza is more important than Detroit. Okay, this is what we have to fight. And where he had huge wins last night, big margins, Washtenaw County, where University of Michigan is, Ingham County, where Michigan State is. You mentioned Kent County, where a lot of universities are. Those college kids are not on campus right now. School hasn't started. So that is where they're going to be. And we as Republicans can't just use platitudes like socialism. We need to show people how scary this ticket is, because if he gets in, this is the new movement for the Democrat Party, and it's scary for our country.
Okay, Ronna, thanks for coming on. Ronna McDaniel, appreciate it. We'll stay in contact. And also right now, the Associated Press is making another call, Aisha. In the city of Detroit, at Congressional District number 13, Donovan McKinney has now been declared the winner. Donovan McKinney was backed by the DSA. Syed was backed by the DSA also, but he's considered a progressive, not a member of the DSA party per se. Right, correct on that. So let's call it 3.5 races yesterday. Cori Bush lost in St. Louis, so you're 0 for 1. But you got a progressive who has now been declared a winner in Detroit, so now you're 1-1. You have another progressive in the middle part of the state, Congressional District 7, who won. So you're now 2-1. And Syed, we'll give him a half point because it's kind of going halfway, shall we say. So it's 2.5 to 1 based on the results from last night between Missouri and Michigan. So be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube.
Now do you see the curse is coming? And I said it's going to start 9/11/2026. And there's even a sub-theme to it. What are we seeing that's happening in New York and in other metropolitan areas? An overtake of the society where Islam is creeping in. In Michigan, it's primarily Dearborn and Hamtramck, but it's creeping from there into other suburbs. Same thing that's happening in New York. Take a look at what happened to London. What about what's going on in Minnesota? People need to wake up here. So this whole 9/11 thing is also tied to that hint that wake up to the caliphate. Not just Rosh Hashanah coinciding with the Sabbath and not being able to blow the shofar, which happens to be on 9/11/2026. Something bad is coming. Something bad is coming. Now the question is, will people hold the line and prevent it from happening? I suspect not, because of what happened in New York. And this will start to metastasize during the midterm election in the United States. Now, how does that translate 2 years later into the general election? I don't know. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the turmeric. This will help to soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. Very important for your immune system and your endocrine system, and also cardiovascular system. Helps with your joints and brain function by soaking up free radicals and lowering inflammation at the brain level. What is going to happen is less amyloidosis. That means that your neurons will be healthier. That the myelin sheath will be healthier for these neurons. Lignans soaks up free radicals, brings down inflammation, helps with the immune system and endocrine system, and helps with those other systems like your cardiovascular system and brain function. Stack them together, and it's a powerful stack. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And zeolite helps to detoxify your body. It helps to bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals, and allows you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue daily, drink filtered water. It's a great way to detoxify your body. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and save some money. And I want you to get healthy. I do these videos for free, and I give you my perspective on what's happening in the news. Now, in terms of the markets, the S&P 500 is trading at 7,749. I have a year-end target at 7,800, and I think that once we hit above that, you want to put a little bit of cash on the side, just a little bit, maybe 5 or 10% at the moment, and see how this evolves. But I think the market is a little bit too hot right now, especially when it comes to AI build out, semiconductors, tech industry. Natural gas is trading at 2.668. I've been shorting natural gas and making some profit today. And oil is trading at 75.71, waiting for the news in the Middle East. If it's going to be positive, we're probably going to be trading close to 70, maybe even 68. If we hear something negative, we're going to be trading closer to $80 a barrel.
potential threat against Iran. Iran is open to negotiations with its Arab neighbors. Those states that favor or support dismantling U.S. military bases, there will be favorable terms to them for those ships to transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
Harvardian is a researcher at the Center for Strategic Studies, and he's been talking to us from Tehran. We're grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go to Mike Hannon, who's joining me live now from the White House. I would imagine, of course, this is being watched very closely by the White House. And are we hearing anything yet about the announcements that we've been listening to just over the last couple of hours or so?
No, there's been nothing whatsoever from the White House. President Trump, of course, not here today. He is in Las Vegas. However, in recent hours, President Trump has been repeating what he has been saying for days now, which is that a deal is close, and that if it doesn't happen, then Iran will be struck really hard. But there's been no response as yet to this latest round of discussions that we are hearing. There's also the possibility that these talks between Oman and Iran are in fact those discussions that President Trump maintains are ongoing, but these are separate to any discussions that may be happening between the United States and Iran. So this in itself is a confusing factor. No doubt there are messages going backwards and forwards via mediators, because critical to this whole point, that deal that Iran is talking about with Oman concerns.
With Vistaprint, you can turn your ideas into custom apparel you can't wait to wear and share. So you can introduce your brand before you even say hi. Give your whole team a glow up in professional polos and outerwear.
Iran has insisted that all vessels use the northern route, which is on the Iranian coast, and any other route that is used, the vessels will be liable to attack. So there's a direct connection between those discussions between Oman and Iran and the United States, and the United States' intent to get either control over the Strait of Hormuz or free passage through it.
It's Mike Hannon at the White House. Mike, thank you very much indeed. Well, John Bolton is a former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and served as National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump in his first term. He says even if there is a deal, he doubts Iran would stick to it for very long.
What Trump wants here has nothing to do with the geostrategic environment in the Middle East. He wants the price of gasoline to American consumers to come down. And I think what he seems to be agreeing to here is a 60-day pause that will not settle any outstanding differences, but will allow toll-free traffic to resume through the Strait of Hormuz, which could result in a lot of oil and gas coming out and during that period of time. So that I'm sure was the interest that the U.S. was following. And if this deal comes through and it lasts for 60 days, that will be a boost for Trump in his efforts to get gas prices to consumers in the U.S. down. This deal obviously has nothing to do with international law like the Iranians keep talking about. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway which should be open to the innocent passage of all commercial vehicles. And what they're trying to do is assert hegemony over the Strait of Hormuz. That violates a fundamental principle of freedom of the seas for the United States. And for the Gulf Arab states, I would think it would be totally unacceptable to put their fate in the hands of Tehran. If anything, there is evidence that's, at least it's been reported in the public press, that the Iranians have resumed activity at Pickaxe Mountain near Natanz. I don't doubt it. I think the pieces of the government in Iran have never abandoned their strategic objective of getting nuclear weapons. That hasn't changed. I think the way this is developing, we'll simply see the attacks of March and April as a big exercise in mowing the lawn in Iran, and within some definable period of time, we're going to be right back to where we were before with the nuclear threat, the threat of Iran's terrorist proxies, and now the threat of hegemony over the Strait of Hormuz coming back to be a problem for everybody concerned. I don't think the Iranians are ever going to agree to any of that. They'll never stop trying to get nuclear weapons. That's why the conclusion is pretty straightforward. If you can't stop the objectionable behavior of a regime like this, pursuing nuclear weapons, supporting terrorism on a worldwide basis, their behavior doesn't change. You either accept that behavior and live with the danger, which I think is unacceptable, or you change the regime.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, Yemen's Ansarul Houthis say they've attacked a Saudi oil tanker in the Red Sea. Laura Carney explains how Houthi attacks in the region could have global consequences.
Yemen's Ansarullah Houthis say they attacked a Saudi oil tanker off the coast of Yanbu on the Red Sea. Now, the group also claimed an attack on Najran Airport in southwestern Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. And they said this was in response to Saudi drones flying over Yemen. Saudi Arabia hasn't yet confirmed that claim. But the Houthis are also escalating their actions in the Red Sea. On the 20th of July, they announced a naval blockade on Saudi shipping, calling it an eye-for-an-eye response to a continued Saudi siege and an attack on Sana'a Airport. Now, the Houthis control much of the Red Sea coastline. You can see it just shaded over here. That's overlooking the Bab el-Mandeb. Now, this is a strait that also connects the Gulf of Aden with the Red Sea, and that's on the shores of Yemen, Djibouti, and also Eritrea. And at its narrowest point, this strait is only 29 kilometers wide. But with renewed threats, they may need to reshuffle the routes, usually bound to Asia via the Bab el-Mandeb. Now, that's either using the bypass route, and this would be via the east-west pipeline going across Saudi Arabia to the Sumed pipeline up into Europe. It could additionally use the Suez Canal. Now, it would have to rely going up through there on the Suez map, and that's a medium-sized tanker. Now, these hold roughly half of the 2 million barrels of oil a Saudi tanker would usually carry. Now, this, we'll have a little look at the journey. In order to get to Asia, it would have to travel up through the Suez Canal, across the Mediterranean Sea, all the way around the African continent until it finally goes en route to Asia. Now, Saudi oil makes up around 66% of cargo moving through the Bab el-Mandeb. And with the Red Sea, it's also around 10 to 12% of global trade. Now, any disruption was adding fresh pressure to global energy supplies.
US Progressive candidate Abdul Al-Sayed has won the fiercely contested Democratic Senate primary in Michigan. The race between Sayed and establishment-backed Haley Stevens has exposed deep divisions within the party.
Please go to my store, go-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize, and also help with inflammation at the gum line and help the health of the gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're also helping your cardiovascular system. A lot of people don't realize poor oral hygiene can lead to problems with your cardiovascular system and valves for your heart. So it's important to use this toothpaste every day, especially during the cold season, because it helps to neutralize. And structural nanosilver is the best toothpaste that you can get. Get a few tubes of it for your household. Clarity Factor, great neurostack to help to get rid of that brain fog, to allow you to concentrate. And over time, you're going to improve that neuroplasticity. You're going to have your neurons link up more. You'll be able to think faster and have better memory. It's a great neurostack that you should be taking every day. Vitamin D3, dual purpose. It's a gene expression cofactor. It also helps to improve denser bone. It helps with cardiovascular health and also improves your immune system. And if you're 40 years of age or older, take Myotrol. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help build muscle. This helps with the gene expression to build muscle. That's a problem. When you get older, you can't build muscle because your genes are methylated. This will help to express the genes that you need to build muscle. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol, and reduce atrophy. It's really simple. This also helps the health of the mitochondria, so you'll have the energy to maintain that muscle mass. And with better muscle mass, you're going to be able to improve your back posture. You're going to be able to move around better. You'll have better gait. And with more musculature, you're going to have higher concentrations of BDNF and myokines, which are neuroprotective. You're actually going to improve your brain function by having more muscle mass. So please go to my store and get the Myotrol. If you are an athlete, younger or older, you will also benefit from Myotrol to help build muscle for your sport. So please go to my store the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into the Minneapolis Fed president talking about moving rates up.
With us is Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari. He was one of the dissenters last week. Let's talk about rates, rate hikes, and your decision to dissent.
Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's great to be here. Inflation's been high now for 5+ years. Energy prices remain high. I think the outlook for the Strait of Hormuz is uncertain. I certainly don't trust the Iranians. And so at some point, the Fed's job is to get inflation back down to our 2% target. Corporate earnings are through the roof. They're doing great. The consumer is hanging in there. The labor market is hanging in there. I look at this constellation and I say, what evidence do I have that monetary policy is particularly restrictive right now? And so I argue now is the time to start slowly moving up as we get more data in.
There were some other dissenters with you. You've dissented before.
I have.
By the way, this was really the first time with Kevin Warsh now in the seat. I'm curious just what your thought was about that, because there was a view that sometimes a new chair comes in, may have a particular view. Sometimes there might be like a honeymoon period. It doesn't seem like you were giving him the honeymoon period.
Well, he said publicly many times that he likes a good family fight. He said that publicly. He said that internally. And I'll just say he said to me, do what you think is the right thing to do for the economy. And I said, I really appreciate that.
So tell me how it happens, because at least historically, the Fed chair has called around before a meeting and said, what are you going to do? What's your plan? And I assume has tried to either talk you into or out of wherever.
That's not exactly how those calls go. So usually those calls go, and Kevin, and we appreciate it, Chairman Warsh has continued the tradition of reaching out to everybody in advance. We have a discussion about how I'm seeing the economy, how he's seeing the economy. We talk about, we might see things similarly or differently. And then I say, hey, here's where I'm likely coming out in terms of my policy recommendation. In this case, I was undecided. I wanted to go into the meeting and hear all the arguments on both sides. And I ultimately decided that raising rates was the right thing to do. I wasn't pounding the table that we needed to raise now, and if we waited till September, that would be too late. But my conclusion, based on everything I listened to, was that it's better to get going.
Okay. Is your expectation that in September, given what you know about the other members and where we are, that we will have a rate hike?
I'm not going to speculate on what the committee might do. We have a lot of data that we're going to get in. We're going to have 2 more inflation prints between now and September. A lot of news potentially to come from the Middle East. Data centers, everything else we're going to look at before we decide.
But just to go back on this a little bit, we talked to Brian Moynihan. His team thinks there could be 3 rate hikes by the end of the year. What is the Neil Kashkari view of the world?
Well, that's not impossible in my view. If inflation continues to move sideways or even get worse from here, then I think we're going to have to start gradually adjusting interest rates to bring things back down. The conundrum that we're facing is traditional economic analysis says if there's a one-time supply shock, monetary policy should just let that flow through the economy, don't necessarily react to it. But now we've had a series of successive supply shocks over 4 or 5 years. Inflation has been frustratingly persistent. It's our job to get inflation back down.
I think Joe's got a question back in New York. Joe?
Yeah, it struck me, Neil. It's good to see you. And I was listening, and you described this great economy and what was going on. And then you said, I don't see any signs that we're being restrictive enough to start hurting this great economy. And just the incongruity of that, I understand where it comes from because it's a blunt tool that the Fed deals with. So you absolutely assume that the reason inflation is too high and gets too hot is because the economy is running too hot. Think of the perfect world we'd have if that wasn't the case. If inflation could be 2% at target and we could be running like this with the economy. Are you sure it's the strength of the economy that it is causing inflation to be above the 2% for the past 5 years? Because maybe it's not grounded in that, and maybe it's not embedded because of that. Wouldn't it be a great world if you didn't say, wow, things are great? I don't think there's no signs we're restrictive. We got to get restrictive to slow this economy down.
Well, obviously, Joe, you know that my goal is not to slow the economy down. The goal is to get inflation back down to our 2% target. And as you said, we have one tool. Now, I don't think most of the inflation that we've experienced is because of economic growth and robust demand. I think most of the inflation has been because of these successive supply shocks. There is a demand element on top of it as well. And nonetheless, it's the Fed's job to get inflation back down to our 2% target. I went back to the transcripts from the 1970s. In the 1970s, the Burns Fed also diagnosed the high inflation as a series of successive supply shocks. I don't think now, this is not the 1970s. The economy is way better than it was in the 1970s on many dimensions. But I don't think anybody would look back and say, boy, the Burns Fed was right to just look through all those supply shocks and let inflation continue to run hot.
Right. Could shrinking the balance sheet do it? I mean, is there any other way to do it other than putting the brakes on the economy?
Well, now the debate about the balance sheet is going to be an interesting one. Some people view that the federal funds rate and the balance sheet can be interchangeable tools, both effectively affecting the stance of monetary policy. So if you believe that, then even if we were to shrink the balance sheet, that would also be tapping the brakes on the economy. And so our primary policy tool is the federal funds rate, and we need to focus on our primary policy tool. I'm not calling for a dramatic increase in interest rates. I'm simply saying I don't see evidence that monetary policy is marginally restrictive right now, and I think we have more work to do to get inflation back down. And I would rather get going now in small steps than wait till later than we have a really entrenched inflation problem and have to raise rates aggressively then.
Let me ask you a different question about maybe another tool, which is communication, or maybe lack of communication. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, which you were intimately involved in, the Fed took on a new posture under Ben Bernanke, which was to be much more communicative. Sometimes that communication worked. I believe that Kevin Warsh would argue today that it didn't work and needs to be rolled back a bit. He said that during the press conference. There's been reports now about not only that, about sort of rolling back how much is spoken about, but even how many meetings are had in a given year. Currently 8. There's been chatter about whether that could turn into 6. What's your position on how the Fed should or should not communicate, and how many meetings, for example, you should have a year?
Well, it's a very complicated topic, and I'm going to start by parroting the chairman, who says there's a task force for that, so I don't want to prejudge. He has some folks looking at this, or they're going to give us some recommendations. Ultimately, the committee has to decide what is the right communications posture. I personally think that communicating what we call our reaction function, so not necessarily making predictions about what we think will happen, but saying, hey, there's a number of different scenarios. If these economic events happen, this is how one would expect inflation and monetary policy to respond. I think that is good for market participants to understand that. Then they can make their own judgments about what the future holds and then what the likely path is.
Is that more information or less information?
It's not more than now. It's continue. I think there's value in continuing the tradition of explaining our reaction function to the public and then letting the public figure it out from there.
And then just hypothetically, would you prefer 8 meetings a year, 6? You get out of an extra 2 meetings if you go that route.
I don't think there's any magic number about 8 or 10 or 6. We always have the ability to call emergency meetings if things happen. But that's a big event. When the FOMC calls an emergency meeting, it really sends a signal that we're concerned about something. And so, I think I'm open-minded. I don't have a strong.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nail silver gels. You can get it in the tube form or the quick dispenser form called Renew. They're dual purpose. They'll help to heal a wound quicker. You can use it as daily skincare. And during the cold season, the allergy season, or just cleaning around the house, put it on your hands, lightly coat your nostrils. They'll stay active for 5.5 hours. Great for the allergy season, great for the cold season. Make sure you have some at home or at work. You never know when you need it. I have Max 35 and Cleanse in stock. Use either one. Cleanse, Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day of either one, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is neutralize, improve your oral cavity, the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. This will help to boost up your innate immune system. Super important. Because if you're reducing the number of times that you get the common cold, the better off you are in slowing the aging process. People that chronically get sick, guess what? You age faster. So this is part of that protocol that I have. The foundation of the protocol is the probiotics. The first pillar, the max 30 fiber cleanse to boost up that innate immune system. The second pillar, C60, to soak up free radicals. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up that immune system and endocrine system. And Boomer Boost to rev up your metabolism and have a steady burn of energy. That works synergistically to help to slow down the aging process and to have longevity and vitality. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, use discount 5, all caps, discount and the number 5, and you get $5 off any order. With that, let's listen into Fox News.
Become a smarter investor with CNBC Pro. 24/7 access to market-moving news and interviews with free global live stream.
We are still waiting on results, and the biggest test yet for progressive Democrats as the race between Michigan Senate candidates Abdul El-Sayed and Haley Stevens is still too close to call this one.
Meanwhile, in Missouri, DSA candidate Cori Bush losing her comeback bid against incumbent Wesley Bell.
Madeline Rivera joins us live from Washington with the details. Good morning, Maddie.
Hi, good morning. That's right, guys. It's hard to overstate the importance of the races in Michigan. The contests reflect the larger ideological battle waging within the Democratic Party. The marquee race in the Wolverine state, the Democratic primary for Senate, remains too close to call. Far-left candidate Abdul El-Sayed is leading establishment-backed Haley Stevens by a little more than a percentage point. Both believe they'll each emerge victorious.
Whatever happens tonight, we have a responsibility to assure that we unite.
This is an older clip. It's not an updated clip. He wins. So let's take a look at let's listen to MS now.
It is time for the group chat, and there is so much to talk about today. It seems we do have a winner in the Democratic Party's biggest and most expensive primary of this summer. We can now officially report that Abdul El-Sayed has won the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate in Michigan. We just heard from El-Sayed's campaign that Stevens called him to officially concede. So let's bring in the group chat. Moshe Wanunu, Mosh News founder and editor-in-chief. He also hosts the Mo News Daily podcast. Philippe Bum, senior data editor and columnist. You know, I like to make him a jet setter. And the CT insider, David Gura, is here, host of Bloomberg This Weekend and the Big Take podcast, and the one and only Reverend Al Sharpton, host of MS Now, Politics Nation, and of course, National Action Network president and founder. And Hans Nichols is here, Axios political reporter and co-author of the Axios Hill Leaders newsletter. Okay, this is the race everybody is talking about. What is your takeaway?
Look, I think a lot of people are going to look at this as a litmus for kind of broader trends within the country. You mentioned how expensive it was, and that's kind of what I'm most focused on here, the amount of money that was poured into this race. I think $30 million from AIPAC alone, but $70 or $80 million was put up against El-Sayed, and I think it's an indictment of our politics, but a very vivid illustration of the fact that money is so critical to these midterms as we've seen them play out thus far. I'll be interested to sort of pick apart the data over the course of the day, sort of where he made inroads and didn't, but yeah, that stands out as the starkest thing for me.
Critical or not, Hans, right? $80 million and a scrappy guy wins, right? It's almost like it's almost like Ukraine using their cheap drones to defeat the world's most expensive missiles.
It would be a fool's errand for you and I to engage in too many more metaphors and too many more similes comparing this, but I take your point, okay? Look, I made a dozen calls this morning, late into the night. The general consensus seems to be that most Republicans are ecstatic. This is exactly the outcome they wanted. They wanted a split decision. They wanted a divided party, and that's what they have on the Democratic side. They also have an El-Sayed that shows that he needs to do some real work
within his own party to assemble a coalition to win in the general election. Now, on the Democratic side, it's not all tears. They're basically having a real hard conversation with themselves, which is to say, how quickly can we come together? How fast can we put bygones behind us? And let's not do a repeat of 2016, where Bernie ended up losing a very close primary, and a lot of Democrats sat it out, and they ended up allowing Donald Trump to kind of sneak a victory. So those seem to be the first cuts, but I'm sure the panel and my esteemed colleagues, including Moshe, will have more to say.
And then let's turn to Moshe.
Thank you, Hans, for the toss. I think there's a number of...
Very sassy, if you didn't know.
I'm familiar with him going back a very long time. I will say that, there are a few interesting trend lines to watch here. As David was saying, going through the numbers on the class divide, the income divide, when you look at the trend line so far when it comes to the progressive candidates and the DSA candidates, they continue, and you saw it again in Michigan last night, they're winning higher income households. And you're seeing also a challenge that Democrats had in 2024 with working class voters, right, where they moved to Trump. Can they win them over? So far, it doesn't appear in these primaries that they're winning them over. And so El Said has about 13 weeks here to bring the party together. And it was interesting listening to him last night, right? He talked about unity. He immediately pivoted to Mike Rogers last night. And so, the big question is, how much resentment will there be there? And in a state where Trump won twice, Trump would say 3 times, right? But Trump won at least twice. Can he be competitive in what is the biggest test now for the progressive wing of the party?
Rev, I want to share for you our new colleague, Peter Alexander. He joined us last night for the special, and he spoke to some voters in Michigan about this primary, and I want to share what they said.
We're somewhat... I'll keep this quick. We need a huge number of donations today to flip this U.S. Senate seat in Texas. If everyone watching this right now made a contribution,
We're somewhat disappointed in the Democratic Party as it currently sits. Not to mean we're going to walk away. We just want somebody, or I think right now in the Democratic primary, we're looking for fighters.
I'm worried that El Said can't beat Mike Rogers. That's my main concern.
So for you, in a lot of ways, this is more about November than it is about August.
Absolutely. Even though the Democrats have a lot of momentum, you still have to choose a person, because Mike Rogers is no joke. He's a strong candidate.
That's an informed, practical voter right there.
I think that you will find that not only throughout Michigan, but throughout the country. And I think that when we talk about dealing with the vote that DSA and the progressive has gotten a higher income, you also have to put the racial element in there. Black voters went for the other candidate here, not El Said. Otherwise, he'd have tied this up last night. And I think he has to figure out how he reaches out to black voters. I think what he's saying is right. I think what he's saying is appealing. But why is it not connecting with black voters? And I'm seeing that with a lot of progressive candidates. We saw what happened in the St. Louis congressional race and with Cory Bush. So I think that you have that because at the end of the day, most black voters, and I deal with this with National Action Network, are practical. We see the enemy as Bush. And I mean, I'm sorry, as Trump. I'm going back. And who can help put a stopgap on Trump is in everybody's head. So in order for the Democrats to win, you're going to have a coalition of, yes, young voters. You got to reach out to them, but you cannot abandon black voters, Latino voters. You have to talk our interests, not just talk about I'm left or right when we feel that the right has not been right with us and the left has left us behind.
But this goes back to the practicality thing, right? There are a lot of people who might say, I want to blow up the system, I want something different. But the system we have is the system we currently have. And they say, we want fighters. There are currently fighters who are part of this establishment, right? If you watch Todd Blanche's hearing yesterday, I'm pretty sure Cory Booker was fighting. I'm pretty sure Sheldon Whitehouse was fighting. But in order for Democrats to actually change the system, they have got to win these Midwestern states.
No, it's very true. I mean, your point is well taken.
It is also the case, however, that people are, as the first voter that you just heard from articulated, very frustrated with the Democratic Party, feel broadly as though the party isn't doing enough in opposition to Donald Trump. I do think it's important to take away from Michigan that this was a candidate who had both the establishment and a lot of money weighed in against him and still won. That suggests that he actually has some political chops that shouldn't be set aside here, right? I want to say about electability, though, that I do think this has become a sort of a problematic issue in American politics.
Explain.
Because electability is really hard to measure. People feel like they have this innate sense of someone being better able to win or not able to win. I'm a polls guy. I believe in polls. I think polls are accurate. Polls weren't very accurate last night. Michigan, this happens, which is totally fair. But it is also the case that polls are not good at measuring things like electability in close races. This is a race where if you have someone like El Said who has shown that he is able to get people engaged, that he is able to build a coalition, that could change the dynamics of who turns out to vote. And if you're mismodeling who's coming out to vote in November, then you're misestimating who's the electable candidate here. So I think that people feel as though they become sort of their own personal little pundits and can evaluate what the standing of a race is. And I think those measurements are often wrong. And so I think to assume that El Said is in a worse position here than Stevens, I'm not sure that's the right read.
Hans, he's a very, very skilled politician. And yes, come today, Mike Rogers and the Republican war chest are going to come at him with millions and millions of dollars, going after DSA, saying communism is coming for you. But here's the thing. What El Sayed actually campaigns on is affordability. How can Mike Rogers actually counter that on actual issues when Donald Trump is out there saying he deserves an A+ for the economy, when that's the #1 issue for voters who are struggling in the current economic climate?
Well, one thing we know Mike Rogers can't do, and that is contradict the president. So let's leave that to the side. Rogers can try to change the conversation, and that's probably what we're going to have throughout most of 2026, is that Democrats are going to be talking about affordability and economy. Again, leave the president out of this. And the Republicans are going to be talking about communism, crime, defund this, defund that. So they want to turn into, my colleague Mark Caputo calls it, the hate election. That's really the strategy from on the Republican side. And it'll just come down to the old referendum versus a choice. And the Republicans want to make this a choice, and Democrats want to make it a referendum on the president. I would just, this whole electability argument we go through every 4 years at least. What's exciting about Michigan, and maybe I shouldn't be so sort of agnostic about it, but what's exciting about it, well, I am agnostic about it, is that this is the test case. This is the Bernie test case from 2016. If the progressive actually wins the primary and then goes on to win the general in a very close state, Michigan was either the second or third closest state in the presidential election, progressives then won't have an argument for 2028 on why one of their candidates should be the Democratic nominee. If Abdul Said goes down in flames and he has a difficult campaign, especially if it's a good year for Republicans, then the centrists, the Harris, the Joe Biden wing of the party will have a much better claim. So again, it's always been a proxy for 2028, but now it's really a test case for what Democrats should do on this electability argument you guys are talking about.
But maybe the issue, David, is, we keep saying progressive, and electability. He is not running on extremely progressive ideals, right? He's not saying, let's open our borders and defund the police. A doctor is saying, let's figure out a way to have Medicare for all.
Yeah, I think it'll be an amazing test here of the efficacy of trying to change that conversation to see if, this effort to make it a hate election really pays off here. But I think about this in contrast with what we just saw during the general election, where affordability, of course, was an issue then, and you had President Trump effectively saying, and his party saying, look, the Biden administration is telling you something, the Harris campaign is telling you something, in fact, that things are more difficult economically than they're telling you things aren't better. I think we kind of have the reversal here. I think that it's going to be very difficult, given the state of the country and the economy today, to make that case. I think that people can recognize pretty acutely how hard life is from an economic vantage and how much worse it's been made by this adventurism in the Middle East, the lack of focus on these economic issues by the president. I think that's the open question, is can you successfully change the narrative when it seems so apparent, I think, to so many people that really is what's front and center.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Barley. This will help to build muscle, detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, which will allow you to recover after your workout, and soak up free radicals. This will also help to improve your immune system and endocrine system, and by soaking up free radicals, And bringing down inflammation, you're helping your cardiovascular health and also brain function. So please go to my store and get the Gladiator Barley. I also have a product called the Heirloom Barley, which doesn't focus on building strength. It just helps to detoxify the body, brings down inflammation, and soaks up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. So if you want to improve your immune system and endocrine system, but you're not focused on building strength, take the Heirloom Barley. If you also want to improve your strength, get the Gladiator Barley. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Sometimes I just want what I want right now, you know? Well, with Chase Secure Bank.
You can't make up what you've lost. One of the most important statistics is that the best month of the year always follows the worst month of the year. And so we show our clients in various ways, like if you try to time the market, you're likely to miss that massive rally like we had yesterday because you were so fearful of what was going on from June and July. The favorites were underperforming. Tech was over. I mean, essentially, if you go back 30 years and you miss the best month of the year, you're underperformed by 500 basis points.
I'll go to the Capital Group out in Los Angeles who've done great studies on this. You got to be in the market. We all know that. But you were weaned in Chicago, the land of fauna and fringe, where you have to play. You discuss that.
Discuss. As my 3 male children would tell me, you miss all the shots you don't take. And I think there is, as you say, it's a disease of trying to time the market. I'll say this, people can be pretty good at selling more or less near local peaks, right? Well, you can see deterioration, you can see it, percent of S&P, advanced decline lines. Right. You can kind of see, you could be headed into a nice little sell-off or consolidation phase, whatever you want to call it, and then you never get back in. And that's the issue, because the lows are ugly. If you think about last Thursday, it just looked like the apocalypse. Actually, it turned out to be a clearing event.
This is the reason why I keep on saying, be prudent. All right, we have a low VIX right now. There should be another spike that happens in the next month and a half to go towards around 2022 for VIX. There is leverage issues with investors in South Korea. There's currency problems, and the currency carry trade with the Japanese yen. Also, the business models for the AI are questionable. Yes, tech is rallying today, but how long is it going to rally? Is it just a relief rally and then all of a sudden it starts to go down again? So I still have 7,800 by year end for the S&P 500. It may hit 8,000, but it's getting a little too rich in terms of the S&P 500. So it's prudent to take a little bit off the table and put it in cash or cash equivalents and wait it out. The support level right now for the S&P 500 is at 7,600. That's a somewhat weak support level. A little bit stronger support level is at 7,200. Another stronger support level is at 7,000. And a very strong support level at 6,800. So if it starts to sell off and you see 7,200, you might want to redeploy a little bit of that cash that you socked away. Or at 7,000. That's prudent. But to take it all off the table, to close all of your equity positions right now, no, stupid idea. But you want about, as it's moving towards the 7,800, slowly take some positions out and put it into cash, cash equivalents. And just wait it out. Just let it keep on writing the equities. Don't sell anymore. You know, anywhere from 10 to a third of the portfolio, all right, as it's getting to above 7,800. And just at 90% or 75% of the equities, just let it keep on writing. Don't rebalance that part of it. And just wait until there is a correction, a big correction, and then redeploy those cash equivalents, and you'll get a better return on your investment. Just right now, I think 7 to 10% cash on hand at this moment, I think is a smart idea.
And, you know, Citadel did great on that, but I'm sure a lot of people were selling right into it. And it's too emotional. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing this, but people fall for it at the same time. You're not going to save yourself anything. You're going to damage your forward returns. The only time you really want to think about next 12 months possibly being lower is if you think a recession's coming. We haven't had a proper recession since 2008. The one in 2020 was man-made. Okay?
That's stunning.
The market since 2010 is up 14% annualized, okay? That includes the 25% sell-off in 2022. That includes the down 6% in 2018. So trying to time it is fruitless. It's from a different era when you actually had recessions every 5 to 7 years, and coming out of the market perhaps saved you some losses. So, you know, the most important thing is there a recession looming? This market, this economy, there's no recession. And by the way, the banks are doing terrific. When banks do great, they're not going into recession. They're the forward-leading indicator.
Technology, AI, focusing on returns on AI CapEx. How do you guys think about that theme right now?
So I think that's the most important theme in the market, and that, of course, was the clearing, was the earnings that we had from some of the hyperscalers. You know, even where the market was disappointed in some of the others, the revenue was going much higher on the cloud business. Mm-hmm. And what we saw was the one question, there are two questions. Can equities rally with the 4.5% bogey on the 10-year being breached? Right? And the answer was like, yeah, actually it was kind of fine. It was fine, okay? So that question was answered. So look, yields probably could get to 5% here simply because between the inflation numbers and, you know, from the questioning of the Fed's reaction function and the uncertainty in Iran, so that's number one, but equities are fine. The second big question is the ROI on spending, and that could have killed the entire market, okay? You would have wound up with healthcare, you know, utilities, and staples working. And the answer is actually the business model is working, even if free cash flow is going negative in the short term, even if they have to sell debt to fund it, they're reaccelerating the core business, which is cloud, and so it's working. And once you answer that question, you're off to the races. The whole complex can rally.
Alicia Levine with this BNY, thrilled you're with us today across America, around the world. Futures up 28. Paul, I ask a question because I got to go nerd here in a moment. Paul Sweeney with Alicia Levine.
Alicia, you say industrials, attractive entry point. And we had great numbers out of Caterpillar yesterday, so boy, that's a great time.
So you have it's a perfect storm. You have the CapEx incentives from the One Big Beautiful Bill, which are rolling through the economy and are definitely helping hard assets, that's industrials, as well as the funding from the hyperscalers. So if you think about what you need to build a data center or what you need to build out the AI on the hard asset side, the projections for next year is $1 trillion in spending. That is going directly into the P&L of 20% of the S&P. So that's why we like it. I mean, industrials have been actually the best sector of the year. We think that continues.
So give us your targets here quickly.
Okay, 8,000 with risk to the upside. Yeah, but risk to the upside here, right? Okay. Forward earnings are growing at 30%.
Okay,
the multiple's lower than it was June 2nd when the market peaked before.
If I look at two sets of difference equations on the x-axis, and I look at all this CapEx, all these tech companies are spending, and matched against that is the same timeline of their huge cash flows and profitability, I say they've only got to go out 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 4 quarters after that CapEx expense to be made whole.
Yes.
Is that in the zeitgeist now? I don't think so.
So we've been running models on it, and it looks like they return to cash flow positive in about 18 to 24 months.
Okay, so that's 6 quarters.
And then it explodes again. Then it explodes. Then they become the bond.
Whoa, positively.
It explodes. The cash flow becomes positive, and then it explodes to the upside.
So what's your?
Because they're monetizing the investment.
You're the first one who's done this. Thank you. What's the fan distribution of outcomes? 24 quarters, whatever.
Okay, let's call it. We're in 2026. Let's call it 2029. So you're looking at about flat 28 to 29, and then it explodes by 2030.
The SP 500 moves every day. What if you could act on that movement today or tomorrow? SIBO prediction markets let you express a simple yes or no direction.
Let's get Macro Maven's president, Stephanie Pomboy's opinion here. Stephanie, great to see you. Welcome. I want to get your take on the macro story. Cheryl just reporting a slight miss.
Before we get that from Fox Business, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has all the minerals and the multivitamins that you need on a daily basis, with lots of other supplements within this compound. It has 68 nutrients to help slow down the aging process, and it works on multiple systems. This is something you should be taking every day, and it is a cornerstone for my anti-aging protocol. What this will do is help with musculature, help with your immune system and endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular health, help with brain function, and soak up those free radicals, bring down inflammation, rev up your metabolism. You'll have a steady flow of energy, no spiking. You'll be able to control your A1C levels. And over time, you're going to notice that you're getting healthier. Now, you can stack this with the barley, either the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. And you can take my protocol, which is really simple. The probiotics, the Max 35, the C60, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, and the Boomer Boost together. And that's a very strong anti-aging protocol. Now, if you can't afford that, I understand. People are worried about their finances. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. And if you can only pick one supplement, get the Boomer Boost. This gives you the minerals, the multivitamins, and many of the compounds that you need to help slow down the aging process. And when you can, then start stacking the way I just mentioned. But this is very important to take every day. Now, I was talking about C60. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, or avocado oil. C60 needs to be in an oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day every day. This is something that I've been doing for over 10 years every day. And what this will do is soak up free radicals about 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. And by soaking up free radicals, you're boosting up the health of your mitochondria. You're going to have more energy. You're going to be able to recover quicker after a workout. When you soak up free radicals at the vascular level, what's happening is you're reducing the concentration of oxidized LDL. And when that happens, you're reducing plaque formation. You're also helping with your neurons. So your brain function is going to improve. And over time, your neurons will link better. Those dendritic connections will allow for faster cognition, faster thinking, and better memory. In addition, C60 is going to help with your immune system and your endocrine system. So you're going to slow down the aging process slowly, and it also helps with your skin health. It helps with the basal layer of your skin, especially if you stack it with resveratrol. Take a teaspoon a day every day. It's about 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C when you're taking a teaspoon a day. All right, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 to save some money. take these supplements every day to help slow down the aging process. These are supplements that I take every day to stay healthy. And if you apply a holistic approach, proper diet and exercise, learning new things, proper sleep, drinking filtered water, staying away from processed foods, you are going to be able to slow down the aging process and not be dependent on pharmacopoeia. All right, so let's carry on with what's going on in the debt market.
On the ADP numbers, job creation of 44,000 versus an estimate of 70,000.
Yeah, surprisingly soft, and the expectations for payrolls this week are, 80,000, which again is sort of on the softer side of the size gains we'd be liking to look at. And it's interesting because I was looking at an overlay of capital spending versus employment, and as you'd expect, normally they move together, and we've got obviously CapEx growing well into the double digits year on year, while employment growth is really, I think, 0.3% year on year. So it's a very unusual divergence. And I guess, maybe part of that speaks to the productivity involved in this whole, very technologically advanced CapEx boom. But it's a problem in terms of getting that engine of growth for the economy, the employment side really strengthening. And the fact that it's taking place also against the backdrop of these resplendent corporate profits is another sort of, a troubling facet. You'd think with 50% growth in profits and this boom in CapEx, that employment growth would be phenomenal, and it's not. So this ultimately becomes a problem in terms of the long-term trajectory for consumer spending if we're not going to get, solid labor income. So very much something to keep an eye on.
If we see the numbers on Friday mimic this, Adam, do you think that the Labor Department's July jobs numbers will mimic what we're seeing in the ADP, which is a slight miss?
That is the pattern that you typically see, which is why people pay attention to ADP. And yet, it's still growth. It's just a question of how much growth. We created, what was it this morning, 40, what was it, Cheryl, 40, how many thousand?
44,000 jobs.
We created 44,000 jobs, right? Let's not, let's not fumble the ball. Let's not turn a win into a loss.
4.4% growth in pay year over year, according to ADP. That's a good number. Yeah, that's certainly good for wages. Well, you've got more earnings on the way, Stephanie. CVS, Disney, Uber, Eli Lilly, all reporting this morning. Lilly reported a strong quarter, raising its annual revenue forecast as the obesity and diabetes drug demand is strong. SpaceX.
So you have the July ADP report of 44,000 that came in, new jobs, but the estimate was 70,000. This is an indication, potentially, that this job market with new job creation that Trump's been toting that oh, this is going to happen, it's anemic. Yes, it's positive, but it's anemic. It's not as good as people are saying. And this, everyone's like focused on, the unemployment, U3 data, but what about the U6 data? How many people checked out? How many people are tired of looking and not getting any response back? What about the ghosting of HR? What about ghost jobs that are posted? What about the problem with AI systems just launching 1,000 resumes at a time? And now we have AI slop in the job seeking domain. I think the job market is anemic. And I personally think that the peace in the Middle East will not hold, and that the overspending in AI is going to crash, and that the circular financing and the business models for OpenAI and Anthropic are not sustainable. That's what I think. Now, it's a pessimistic view, but it looks like everyone's super optimistic once the SP500 went to 7,723. What happens when it breaks 7,600 again? It starts marching to 7,200. Maybe I'm right. And this is the reason why putting about 7 to 10% in cash or cash equivalents is prudent.
Reported a beat in its first quarterly report. Of course, they lost money, but it was less than they thought. Strong AI revenue results and forecasts also, but of course, the lockup period has begun. Lockup expirations began after the company's second quarter report last night, and the lockup timing is well known. Expectations have put pressure on this stock because they're expecting insiders to start selling. Stephanie, your thoughts on the backdrop in terms of earnings? I know you've been worried about a competition for capital versus the government and private investors, right?
Yeah, well, speaking of the lockup, we have this situation now where the stock market has shifted from having this wonderful tailwind of share buybacks that were exceeding $1 trillion a year to now having net issuance. Led primarily with the SpaceX IPO this year, issuance is up 170% year on year. But the point is that we've gone from an environment where the corporate sector was really one of the main purchasers of U.S. equities, supporting the stock market via these buybacks, which simultaneously, by the way, serve to inflate earnings per share metrics since they're based on the number of shares. So that has been a tremendous tailwind, and it's now turning the other way. At the same time, as you mentioned, we've got this massive debt issuance tied with this CapEx boom because a lot of the big companies, the hyperscalers, et cetera, have burned through their free cash flow and are now turning to the markets and saying, we need to borrow money if we're going to keep this expenditure at this pace. And in the background, you've got the U.S. government trying to roll $10 trillion in paper, which is, obviously an enormous sum of money. And we've never had this kind of chase for capital ever in history. Yeah. So this is going to be something to watch. It's already putting upward pressure on bond yields across the spectrum.
Stephanie, let me switch gears for a second, because the Japanese yen is up about 4% against the dollar. Since the announcement on Friday that the U.S. was going to support Japan and intervene in markets, your thoughts on what has taken place here? Because we spoke with Nick Timros earlier in the Wall Street Journal, and he writes, Besant's request represents an early test of how Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh, who took office in May, intends to draw the line between the central bank and the administration that installed him when it comes to things like intervention and supporting the yen.
Yeah, well, I think that he's getting involved in part because the issue is that when Japan on its own attempts to support the yen, it does it obviously by selling dollars, which in turn means they're selling U.S. treasuries, which was putting additional upward pressure on long-dated bond yields. So he's now using the ESF, and I think what he did was actually sell euros in exchange for yen in this intervention. So it's a way to reduce the pressure on the long end of our yield curve that was being placed by this constant Japan intervention. So it makes sense that the U.S. is trying to get involved to tamp that down.
Stephanie, it's great to get your take on all of that. Thank you so much. Stephanie Pomboy.
10-year yield may hit 5%, and the 30-year yield we may be seeing north of 5.5%. This is getting crazy. The cost of our debt, that yield curve is going up, and the Federal Reserve is hinting that they're going to raise rates. That's going to hurt people's mortgages. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. This will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your cartilage, for your joints, musculature, and bone density. This is very important to take every day. It's a month's supply. And collagen. Collagen you take every day, and what this will do is help to remodel your joints. Block the pain gatekeeper, NAV 1.7, reduce inflammation by blocking EP4, and reduce the erosion of the joint by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. By taking this, you're going to be able to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint. Now, I recommend that what you do is you open up the joint to the point of pain and open it up a little bit more and count to 20 or 30 seconds. relax, and do that 3 times. Do that daily, and what you're going to notice is that you're creating the micro signal by doing this exercise, and taking the collagen and the collagen and rebuilding that joint. And this is perfect for arthritis, arthritic joints, and also sports injuries. You just slowly rebuild that joint. And depending on how long you've had the problem, depends on how long it takes to reduce the pain and remodel. But it can be done. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great products that I offer, like the collagen and the collagen, and all the other supplements. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. That's the end of the broadcast. Just to recap, the SP 500 is trading at 7,731. And I think it's prudent to move a little bit, 5-7% of your equity position into cash or cash equivalents. Just kind of wait it out. Let the rest of your equity positions keep on riding up if it goes up. And if it goes down, if the equities go down, it's okay. Use that cash to buy in, especially if it hits the trigger of 7,200, 7,000, or better yet, 6,800. I just told you how to make some money. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do. All these videos are for free. Please share the links, ask your social media to follow me, and be a paid member to my Patreon channel. I greatly appreciate it because it's through the help of the individuals that watch the show that allows me to do this for free. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.